Chapter 468. Many people said that there was only a fine line between a genius and a madman. As the lead disciple of Kunlun sect, a super sect in the Wanxian League, Zhou Mumu was undoubtedly a genius. However, whenever this genius saw Wang Lu, she felt that Wang Lu was standing on the other side of the line, far away, waving at her. Next, the first field investigation of the Wind of Destruction is about to begin. Hearing Wang Lu's enthusiastic words, Zhou Mumu could not believe her ears. What did you say? Wang Lu repeated it without changing his tone in the slightest. Are you crazy? Hearing this, Wang Lu smiled without saying anything, while Zhanzai simply sneered disdainfully. Mortal wisdom. Zhou Mumu ignored Zhanzai's provocation and anxiously said, It doesn't matter how Zhanzai wants to die. But Wang Lu, you also want to mess around? We have confirmed the authenticity of the Wind of Destruction in the past few days. It's not ABA's nonsense, yet you still dare to try it? Do you really think non-phase sword defense is invincible in the world? Thus, even Wang Lu showed a disdainful smile. Mortal wisdom. Before he could finish, Zhou Mumu stepped forward and grabbed his collar. I'm not joking with you. Well, here's the thing. Wang Lu had to elaborate on the field investigation plan that he and Zhanzai had formulated. The first is the purpose of the investigation. At present, our clues about returning to 9 regions have basically been cut off. No matter who we ask in the new demon world, the answer is that the space barrier of the new demon world is unbreakable. During this period, we have also tried to break through the barrier several times, including the sect's heavenly talisman and other means. It proves that the new demon world is completely isolated from the 9 regions. But I don't think things are desperate, because there are still too many unknown contents waiting to be explored in the new demon world. Maybe the clue to return to 9 regions is hidden in it. And among them, the Wind of Destruction is undoubtedly the most suspicious. Wang Lu explained, according to the legend of the people of the New Devil Realm, all the people who walked under the night sky when the Wind of Destruction came were dead, but no one has ever seen their bones. It was as if they disappeared from the world. Even the royal family was no exception. Therefore, I thought that there should be 2 possibilities. The first is that the Wind of Destruction is truly invincible, and even Taoist masters of deity transformation realm can't withstand a single blow. As for the second possibility, I suspect that the Winds of Destruction didn't kill those people, but only teleported them to another place. Teleport to another place? Wang Lu's conjecture caused everyone to be shocked. At first, it seemed like a baseless conjecture, but if one thought about it carefully, it seemed to make a lot of sense. Many incomprehensible situations could be explained with this reason. Then, where do you think the Winds of Destruction might teleport people to? Wang Lu said, no matter where it is, it's always better than this cage-like new demon world. More importantly, it means a breakthrough direction, and it's also the only direction that we can break through at present. The new demon world is full of talented people, but they haven't been able to find the way to the outside world for 2,000 years. I don't think repeating their previous attempts can get any breakthrough results, and the Wind of Destruction is probably the only blind spot of the demon race in the past 2,000 years. That does make sense, but there's no need to rush to risk our lives, right? Of course not, we're going to risk our lives. However, before Wang Lu's voice fell, he heard Chonghua Xian interrupt. If junior brother Wang Lu wants me to go to the Wind of Destruction to explore the way for you, it's better to give up this idea as soon as possible. Wang Lu gawked for a moment, and then looked at Zhanzai. Senior brother Zai, it seems that we can only start plan B. Zhanzai was also quite regretful. Senior sister Chonghua, as the lead disciple of Shangjing sect and the #1 Taoist master of King Pil in the Wanxian League, unexpectedly can't look at the overall situation, and also doesn't have the spirit of academic exploration. It's really regrettable. However, having said that, the 2 of them had obviously expected Chonghua's refusal. Therefore, Zhanzai immediately took out the backup device from his mustard seed bag. It was a quaint, slightly strange twisted branch, and at the end of the branch hung 2 big eyeballs. If it weren't for the lively breath of life in the branch, this branch would look like a cursed object. What is this? Zhou Mumu asked. Sentry guard. Zhanzai replied. It's our 10,000 art sect's newly designed immortal props. Its main body is between living and dead, but it has a powerful perception and resonance ability. In the past 2 days, I and junior brother Wang Lu have worked together to further transform it so that its image can be directly projected on the water curtain, so that we don't need to personally establish a connection with it, thus avoiding the risk. Next, as long as we place it outside the city, when the wind of destruction comes, we can hide in the house in the city, watch the image sent by the sentry guard from outside the city, and analyze its mystery. Upon hearing this, Zhou Mumu was stunned for a moment, and then she shook her head. This is too whimsical. It's not like this sentry guard props have never been used before. There are also shadows of nothingness and the like among the demon race. If this remote monitoring can analyze the secret of the wind of destruction, the demon race would have done it a long time ago. Humph, mortal wisdom. Zhanzai coldly snorted and then explained, the reason why the demon race's remote monitoring failed is because the moment the wind of destruction comes, all the shadows of nothingness will instantly disappear, so there's no time to transmit the message, and there's no wreckage for people to study. But this sentry guard of mine is different from the demon race's outdated products. Its biggest advantage is that the way it transmits information is through resonance, so the image is completely synchronized without any hindrance. At the same time, the frequency of information transmission is very fast, and the sensitivity is also very high, so no details will be missed. As long as the wind of destruction comes, I can discover the secret behind it through the sentry guard. This? Zhou Mumu was slightly shaken. If it was just remote monitoring, it didn't seem to be risky, and it was very feasible. All right, but you must be careful, because I have an ominous premonition that great danger seems to be hidden behind the wind of destruction. It's precisely because you have big breasts that you should try it yourself, Wang Lu said. After confirming the plan, the 5 of them began to put it into practice. The principle of the sentry guard was simple, but the practical application was not. An immortal art prop that transmitted information with zero delay, and at the same time ensured that the information was sufficient, required very powerful and precise control of magic. And this was a little difficult for the cultivators of the King Pill. Wang Lu and Zhanzai alone were not enough to control it, so the other lead disciples had to participate in it. At the same time, due to the great reputation of the wind of destruction, all the demons who tried to explore it in the past 2,000 years in the new demon world disappeared without exception, which made this move inevitably a bit risky. Although in theory, the 5 of them did not really need the divine sense necklace of the sentry guard, so even if the sentry guard was instantly destroyed, it would not cause a backlash. However, there were exceptions to everything. How could the 5 of them, Taoist masters of the King Pill, rashly try a problem that could make the new demon world helpless for 2,000 years without any risk? However, if they didn't take any risk, did they really have to cultivate to the realm of breaking the void and then consider returning to 9 regions? That was not the way to do it. Therefore, the next thing they did was to arrange the array. The main structure was a circular 5 elements array, with a sentry guard in the center, which resonated with the one that was placed outside the city in advance. After the resonance was established, the 2 round eyes of the sentry guard in the array began to shine, and 2 beams of light were projected on the wall of the room. A trickle of water flowed on the wall, forming a water curtain. A moment later, the light was projected on the water curtain, and the image gradually became clear. Outside the city, it was already dark. The new demon world did not have the bright galaxy of 9 regions, nor the bright moon. Even the light in the city had been extinguished. For a time, the 5 of them could not see anything. Fortunately, Wang Lu was already prepared. He reached out and touched the array under his feet. A trace of spiritual energy entered the array and was transmitted to the outside of the city by means of resonance. The sentry guard outside the city immediately shone, which was a good insurance measure that Wang Lu had set up before. Once there was no light source, it would automatically illuminate the surroundings. After there was light, the surrounding scene became clear. The new demon world under the curtain of night looked no different from the past. Obviously, the wind of destruction had not really arrived. However, the 5 lead disciples were all focused. Zhanzai, who presided over the array, had a slight sweat on his forehead. With his Taoist master of the King Pill's golden body without leakages, it could be seen that his mind was very nervous at this time. Under high tension, the concept of time had become distorted. After an unknown period of time, Wang Lu finally saw a trace of abnormality in the water curtain projection. It seems to be coming. Before this, no one had seen the wind of destruction with their own eyes. However, the message that resonated through the sentry guard was filled with an oppressive atmosphere. Something was indeed coming. And just when everyone realized this, the sentry guard in the 5 elements array suddenly exploded. Damn sure enough. Wang Lu and Zhanzai cursed in unison. At the same time, they changed the array to isolate the sentry guard in the middle. Then, a series of dazzling explosions continued in the 5 elements array. Fortunately, they did not establish a connection with the sentry guard. Otherwise, the backfire would probably be enough to kill anyone present. It's really sudden. Did you guys see anything? After suppressing the backfire, Wang Lu asked the others. However, from Chionghua to Zhoumumu, they all shook their heads. Just now, they just had a premonition that a crisis was coming, but before anything actually happened, the sentry guard had already exploded. Even though they were fully focused, they did not see any clues. Very well, we have already expected this, so start the playback function. After Wang Lu said that, Zhanzai pointed at the water curtain on the wall. Suddenly, the water curtain set off ripples, and the picture returned to the previous one. But the playback speed was slowed down by thousands of times. This was also the biggest role of the 5 elements array on the ground, to faithfully record all the feedback from the sentry guard for playback. After the playback was slowed down by thousands of times, everyone finally saw a clue in the picture. It was an almost imperceptible grayish-white in the dark night. When that grayish-white was magnified again, Wang Lu's face suddenly changed. This is the spirit of the dead skeleton? That's right. With the memory of the top student of Spirit Sword sect, how could he not remember that this was the spirit of the dead skeleton that he had seen countless times in the black tide of the Western Mountain? This wind of destruction was indeed inextricably linked to the black tide. Chapter 469. After seeing that the grayish-white color was the black tide of the demon world, more mysteries emerged. Why was it the black tide? Then what exactly was the black tide? In fact, since Wang Lu saw the black tide for the first time in the Western Mountain Savage Land, he had been thinking about what exactly the black tide was. Personally experiencing it, Wang Lu only felt that what he saw was the collection of all the evil in the world, which was opposed to all the good, like a curse left by the gods. 9 regions was so big that even if there were some strange scenes in some remote corners, it was not surprising. However, when Wang Lu entered the demon world, he found that the black tide was not unique to 9 regions. Moreover, compared with the black tide in the Savage Land, the black tide in the demon world seemed to be more authentic. Later, the royal family sisters explained that the origin of the black tide was after the destruction of the eternal tree in the demon world, the collapse of the laws of heaven and earth, which made the demon race become crazy and gradually transformed into the undead in the black tide. This statement was somewhat reasonable. However, when Wang Lu entered the new demon world and saw the black tide for the 3rd time, the statement of the royal family sisters was obviously untenable. If the black tide was the product of the collapse of the laws of heaven and earth, then why would there be a black tide in the new demon world where the laws were stable? What was even more inconceivable was that, if the true face of the wind of destruction was the black tide of the demon world, then how could one not be affected by it just by hiding in the city? What was even more strange was that, according to the people of the new demon world, if it was too late to return to the city, as long as one took the medicine in time and fell asleep, one could resist the damage of the wind of destruction. Wang Lu had been experiencing the black tide in the Western Mountain for nearly a year, but he never felt that he could protect himself by sleeping in the face of the black tide. At the same time, the black tide would not be blocked by mere city walls and buildings. There was another detail problem. According to Wang Lu's initial assumption, the wind of destruction was likely to send people to another space. However, from the feedback of the sentry guard, this hypothesis was undoubtedly wrong. The wind of destruction was worthy of its name. It was a disaster that brought destruction. But because of this, Wang Lu felt strange. Alas, there are more and more problems. After some analysis, Zhou Mumu sighed and was very annoyed. Only Zhanzai was still in high spirits. There are more and more problems worth studying. Zhou Mumu rolled her eyes at him. She couldn't be bothered to waste her breath on this idiot. We have basically done everything we could do tonight. Similarly, he couldn't feel any vitality within 100 meters, as if he was in a dead city. Just a few minutes ago, this city was still noisy and crowded. And at this moment Wang Lu suddenly felt a slight chill in his heart, as if danger was approaching, so he no longer wasted time looking for people. Things had come to this point, what should be seen had been seen. Next, let's go back first. After returning to their own courtyard, Qianghua and others did not rest, but fell into a dispute over the problem of the black tide. For this strange scene everyone had their own guesses, but no one could come up with a reliable explanation. It was purely the immortals. Seeing Wang Lu enter the house, Zhou Mumu got up and asked, "How is it?" Listening to Zhou Mumu's question, it was obvious that she also realized that Wang Lu went out with a clear purpose, not just for a casual stroll. So Wang Lu sighed and said, "Unexpected." Then he told in detail what he had seen and heard, and it suddenly surprised everyone. Everyone disappeared. If I remember correctly, just when I came back from the food stall, I saw the family in the neighboring building. They were arguing about their children's participation in the Higher Magic Education Zanarkand Unified Exam. After that, I haven't seen them go out. When the wind of destruction comes, they won't go out randomly, but when I broke the door just now, I didn't see anyone. It can't be that they deliberately put on a show to deceive us and sneak away when people are not paying attention. Zhou Mumu shook her head, puzzled. But if that's not the case, could it be that someone took this opportunity to murder him? But speaking of this, Zhou Mumu could feel the absurdity of it herself. Obviously, the mysterious disappearance of the city people is related to the wind of destruction. This is the first time we have experienced the wind of destruction in the new demon world, but for the locals, it has been a tradition that has lasted for 2,000 years. So the best way now is to wait until tomorrow morning to see if the people who disappeared will come back again. Will the people who disappeared come back again? If possible, it is best to monitor them closely, but if they really come back out of thin air and see us uninvited guests trespassing, I am afraid it will cause unnecessary trouble, so let's wait here quietly for now. Well, it seems that we can only wait and see first. In the middle of the night, the 5 chiefs only felt that time was unprecedentedly long, and as time went by, the darkness outside the window seemed to become thicker. Could it be that outside the city wall of Zanarkand, there was really a raging black tide? The horrible scene of the night of hundreds of ghosts in the West Mountain black tide was still fresh in their memory. Even far away, they could hear the whispers of the dead. However, his spirit was as excited as if he had taken a forbidden drug. Were it not for the fact that he had seen many such fanatical fans in the city in the past few days, Wang Lu would definitely treat him as if he was possessed by the devil. But now Wang Lu just sighed and asked, "Isn't the opening ceremony in the evening?" ABA nodded. "But it's almost morning." What is the logical relationship between your two statements? There is less than a day before the opening ceremony. A qualified fan of the Zanarkand Star team should enter the stadium at least half a day in advance to sing the team song and cheer for them. They entered half a day in advance. No matter how much you sing, can they hear you? That's not important. The important thing is, ABA wanted to explain, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he found that he was somewhat at a loss for words. How could he explain the romance of the lightning ball to a wood-like inhabitant of the old demon world? In your old demon world, there is probably no sport to speak of, so there is no way to understand the charm of the first sport in the new demon world. Wang Lu raised his eyebrows. Of course there is. In fact, although our civilization has withered, we also have a rich variety of sports. Oh, Abby suddenly became interested. What is the most popular sport in your world? The most popular? Wang Lu thought for a moment. Then it should be the piston sport. Huh. A sport created to deal with the high mortality rate in extreme environments. Both sides of the sport are composed of a man and a woman. The content is to create love and release passion through friction. A sport that is very suitable for reproduction. ABA didn't really understand. Anyway, since you like sports too, that's for the best. But the piston sport you mentioned is a product of the old demon realm after all. If you want to truly experience the charm of the Eternal Shield Lightning Ball League, come with me. With that, ABA pulled Wang Lu's hand and dragged him out of the door. The 4 feather friends put on a fancy hat for Wang Lu. and put on the Xanarkand Star team uniform. He dressed exactly like them, and then they shouted and laughed happily like a group of psychopaths. However, during the league, the atmosphere of the entire city was generally like this. Wang Lu thought for a moment and felt that there was no need to be pretentious about this matter. After changing into the team uniform, he began to greet the others. Senior sister Mumu, you guys come and change your clothes too. ABA and the others have prepared a set for each of us. At the entrance of the courtyard, Zhou Mumu looked at Wang Lu, who had dressed up like a top 10 fan, with disgust. Then she asked with great difficulty, "Don't you feel ashamed?" Wang Lu replied, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do. What's shameful about that? When we watch the game live, the surrounding people will be wearing team uniforms and cheering. Only you, a noble and cold person, will act like a green tea bitch. That's the real shame." Zhou Mumu had nothing to say, and could only obediently change into the team uniform. The strange thing was, when she put on the shirt, she actually felt a magical joy from the bottom of her heart, as if there was a magical power hidden in this team uniform. In Wang Lu's view, it had nothing to do with any mysterious power. It was simply easier to lose moral integrity than to pick it up. With Wang Lu and Zhou Mumu taking the lead, the others also changed their clothes. Not long after, a rather professional-looking Xanarkand fan team was formed. After that, ABA led the way to the Lightning Stadium in the center of the city of Xanarkand, a spherical field floating in midair. At this time, there was a sea of people outside the stadium. Thousands of demons gathered here, waiting in a long line to enter. ABA quickly let a few people in through a small door. "Speaking of which, it's all thanks to you. Sir Advisor has prepared first-class tickets for you. In the past, I could only buy second-class seats at best. The queue is long and the seats are not good. This time, it's all thanks to being your tour guide that I have the honor of sitting in the first-class seats." After ABA sighed with emotion, he led everyone to their seats. The first-class seats were very close to the stadium. Everything in the stadium could be seen at a glance, of course. With the eyesight of the demons, the distance was not important. What was important was that the first-class seats were very close to the most distinguished seats in the stadium. This was the most important reason why Wang Lu was willing to participate in the opening ceremony of the Lightning Ball League. He had no interest in the Lightning Ball League, nor in the traditional culture of Xanarkand. He was not even interested in the fanatical female fans who wore simple clothes on the field. He was only interested in the great demon king who would be there in person. The master of the new demon world, the legendary great demon king who had supreme power, enough to suppress a world. He did not know how useful the magic jade would be when he saw him. After enduring the noise in the stadium for more than half a day with faint expectation, Wang Lu finally waited for the arrival of the new great demon king. The great demon king's entrance didn't have any earth-shattering grandeur. The stadium only felt the noise suddenly lighten. Then, at the VIP seats in the center, a thick black shadow suddenly expanded and shrank. As it expanded and inhaled, the originally empty VIP seats were filled with a few more people. Most of them were the personal bodyguards of the great demon king. In the middle were two noble demons dressed in black heavy armor with blood-red cloaks on their backs. As soon as they appeared, they exuded an amazing aura, which made more than 100,000 demons in the entire stadium feel oppressed. However, the power of the great demon king only lasted for a moment, and it was quickly restrained. Just now, it was just a necessary procedure for the arrival of the great demon king to show his presence. After that, there was no need to continue to release pressure to dampen the mood. However, it was that short moment of aura that made Wang Lu frown. Strange, why do I feel that the aura is somewhat familiar? Turning his head, he saw several equally solemn faces. Qianghua and the others nodded, expressing that they felt the same way. At this moment, the noise in the stadium became even lower, and the center of the spherical stadium began to change light, indicating that the opening ceremony was about to begin. The first part of the opening ceremony was when the great demon king made a speech and personally raised the eternal shield. He used the shield to attract the heavenly thunder, turning the entire stadium into a blazing and dazzling ball of lightning. After that, after 10 months of competition, the team with the best performance would be qualified to pick up the shield raised by the Demon King and win enough glory to be treasured for a lifetime. The demon king of the new demon realm was a leader who paid attention to efficiency. After arriving, he did not want to wait any longer and directly started the opening ceremony of the league. Under the joint gaze of more than 100,000 spectators in the stadium, and 10 times or even 100 times more spectators outside the stadium, the great demon king stepped out and flashed from the VIP seats to the center of the stadium. The dark and heavy armor did not slow him down in the slightest. Then, standing under the focus of everyone's eyes, the great demon king slowly took off his helmet mask, revealing a young and beautiful face. The moment the helmet was taken off, Wang Lu, Qianghua, Xiangliang, Zhou Mumu, and Zhang Zai stood up at the same time looking shocked. Because the face behind the helmet was the elder sister of the royal sisters who had disappeared in the old demon realm. Although the figure was obviously taller than the one in the old demon realm, and the armor was stronger and more gorgeous, the delicate but unconcealable resolute face was the same. Turning his head, the other heavily armored demon king who was still standing in the VIP seats also took off his helmet. Not surprisingly, it was the younger sister of the pair of sisters. One of the 4 great joys in life was to meet an old friend in a foreign land. However, at this time they were in a foreign country, and they had indeed met an old friend, but Wang Lu and the others could not be happy. Why were the two of them here? Chapter 471. There were many people in the world who were born with similar appearances, so there were countless misunderstandings. But for Taoist King Pil, he would never mistake someone for someone else just because they looked similar. There were too many characteristics that could identify a person. If they all matched, it was hard to think it was a coincidence. Therefore, Wang Lu and others made a judgment in the first place. These 2 demon kings were the royal sisters who disappeared in the old demon realm, because they were far away from the wreckage of the eternal tree. But the next question was, why did the 2 sisters who should have died a long time ago appear here? Everyone witnessed the death of the 2 sisters that day, so it couldn't be fake. But at this time, the one standing in the middle of the stadium was undoubtedly the deity. What was even more strange was that the royal sisters died just a few days ago, and these 2 demon kings had been in power for at least more than 100 years. How could this contradiction be explained? More and more, Wang Lu and others fell into deep confusion. Even the process of how the great demon king announced the start of the league and how he raised the eternal shield to attract the sky thunder, they were indifferent and didn't care. Until a purple-blue thunder fell from the sky and ignited the whole stadium. Countless electric arcs gathered around the stadium, dazzling everyone. The thunder also temporarily interrupted their thoughts. As the eternal shield was raised high, the atmosphere of the stadium was ignited, and the cheers drowned everything. Under the cover of the cheers, Wang Lu quietly left the first-class seat. Aba, who was a guard, had good eyesight. He saw Wang Lu, who was quietly hiding. He wanted to stop him and ask about the situation, but he was soon attracted by the next wave of cheers. It turned out that the great demon king had raised the shield above the stadium. This meant that the next part of the opening ceremony was about to begin. The performance teams from all over the new demon realm would bring extremely wonderful performances. ABA had been thinking about the team of beautiful dancers from Lucas City for a long time. As the first team to perform, they had already begun to step onto the stage one after another amidst the cheers. Their coquettish figures instantly attracted ABA's attention. The performance in the stadium would last for a long time until the first game, but Wang Lu knew that he didn't have much time. The great demon king wouldn't stay for too long. The 2 of them were only there to witness the start of the league tournament. When the great demon king raised his shield, they would prepare to leave. The following games were of extraordinary significance to the fans, but for the demon king, he had more important work to deal with. In fact, after the dancers from Lucas City appeared, the 2 demon kings were already ready to leave under the escort of their bodyguards. But at this moment, an uninvited guest arrived, forcing them to stop in their tracks. "Who are you?" After seeing Wang Lu, the great demon king tilted his head curiously, then waved his hand to dismiss the bodyguards who crowded around him. Under normal circumstances, this kind of person who suddenly appeared in a place where they shouldn't be would be subdued by the bodyguards immediately, and then handed over to the corresponding personnel to deal with. The overall atmosphere of the new demon world was indeed harmonious and orderly, but daring to offend the demon king was definitely a dead end. However, the great demon king hadn't seen such a suicidal person for many years. Moreover, this ordinary-looking man in front of her had a familiar temperament. So, she decided to put aside the rules for the time being and first understand the inside story. Of course, as the great demon king, this was all she could do. If the other party really didn't know how to appreciate favors, then there was no need for her to continue wasting time. As the demon king who ruled a world, there were countless tasks that required her to put in effort, and the person in front of her was nothing. Wang Lu also knew that his time was limited, so he went straight to the point and took out the demon jade pendant from his chest. How do you feel when you see this? The moment the demon jade appeared, an astonishing amount of heat was emitted from the jade. A ripple spread out, enveloping everyone in the VIP seats. The demon king's bodyguards were somewhat at a loss. According to the rules, they should subdue or even kill Wang Lu at the first instance to ensure the safety of the great demon king. But it was clearly the demon king himself who had ordered them not to make a move for the time being. It was really difficult for them. As for the ripple in the demon jade, it had no effect on them. However, when the ripple reached the two demon kings, they trembled slightly, obviously affected. Then, the tall elder sister suddenly made a move and released a gray space. A gray luster bloomed from the demon king's palm and quickly spread out, enveloping the entire space where the VIP seats were located. The world outside the space froze at this moment, and only the time in the gray space was still flowing. The great demon king looked at Wang Lu with a somewhat complicated gaze and nodded. You came here faster than we expected. Wang Lu smiled when he heard this. He knew that he had made the right bet. After seeing the demon jade, the reactions of the two demon kings were indeed somewhat different. There's no other way. If we don't hurry up, I'm afraid we'll completely adapt to the rhythm of the new demon world. This is indeed a dreamlike paradise that makes people forget to return. Wang Lu's words were not false. The few chief disciples had only lived in the new demon world for less than 10 days, but they had gradually fallen into this new world. Every day, they would get up early to enjoy the food of the new demon world in the food stalls, and then walk in the streets and alleys to observe and appreciate the wonders of this new civilization. Life was very fulfilling, simple and happy, which made people vaguely enjoy it and forget to return. The most obvious evidence was the opening ceremony of today's Lightning Ball League. For the people in the other world, no matter how lively the festival was, it had nothing to do with them. So why would they put on their team uniforms, put on colorful hats, and dress up like the local natives to celebrate the opening ceremony? Because imperceptibly, they had been assimilated by the new demon world. Wang Lu speculated that if he didn't find the Demon King sisters before the end of the opening ceremony and trigger the key event sooner or later, the most elite young cultivators in 9 regions would be completely lost in the new demon world and spend the rest of their lives as demons. This land had this kind of magical and incredible magic. Fortunately, you still remembered what we entrusted you to do. As the great demon king, the elder sister's eyes were a bit complicated. She wanted to say something but hesitated. The younger sister was a bit more straightforward. You have seen the truth, right? Wang Lu smiled and said, a new world with neither foreign enemies nor internal troubles. An incredibly fertile and rich land. A demon race that can put down all disputes and live in harmony. A demon civilization that can evolve to such a level in just 2,000 years. And the wind of destruction that blows every once in a while, and every time the wind of destruction comes, the residents of the new demon world would disappear. Finally, the Demon King sisters who should have died but came back to life. With so many clues coming together, it's hard not to see it. The dreamlike land is actually worthy of its name. Wang Lu paused and looked outside the gray world, at the colorful but stagnant world. Actually, until now, I still find it hard to believe that there is actually a world purely composed of dreams. As a great demon king, the elder sister said softly, this is the last miracle of the demon world. When the eternal tree fell, we tried all kinds of methods, but we couldn't save the situation. No matter how many sacrifices we made, we couldn't protect our home, so in endless despair, we chose another way. Wang Lu felt the sadness inadvertently revealed in the few words of the great demon king and asked softly, New demon world. Yes, almost all the survivors of the demon world were gathered together, and the demon king led a group of demon monarchs to create a miracle. At that time, the Demon King and the Demon Monarchs used a secret technique that had been passed down since the birth of the demon world civilization, the dream-building technique. Dream-building technique? Simply put, it is the ability to manipulate and create dreams. It is a very magical and rare skill that is only occasionally passed down among the royal families of the demon world. The dream-building technique can create a magnificent dream that looks real. But a dream is just a dream after all. In the eyes of the demons, it doesn't have high practical value, so it has never been taken seriously. It was not until the demon world was facing the crisis of destruction that we ironically discovered that the only thing that could continue the demon civilization was this self-deceiving spell. The Demon King sighed and then said, "It's probably a blessing in disguise." In the face of a desperate situation, the demons tried their best to use the dream-building technique and achieved an unprecedented achievement. The dream built by hundreds of millions of surviving demons was almost transformed into an independent and real new plane. This new world carries all our hopes and condenses all the good blessings. The weather here is beautiful and the products are abundant. The surrounding spiritual energy can cleanse people's hearts and make the most ferocious demons docile and harmonious. At this point, Wang Lu couldn't help but interrupt. Many races of the demon race are proud of their bravery and fighting, so why would they dream of such a sweet world? Because in despair, we have painfully reflected that the aggressive nature of the demon race is the culprit that caused all the tragedies. If there were no endless internal strife, we could have conquered the 9 regions during the first great war of immortals and demons, forever eliminating the future trouble. And if it weren't for the fact that we couldn't let go of the deep hatred between the two worlds and continued to fight with human beings, we might not have led to the disaster of the destruction of the demon world. This kind of thinking was indeed cowardly for the demon race. However, when the eternal tree collapsed, the pillar of belief of the demon race also collapsed. And when the new world was established under the guidance of the Demon King at that time, the tone of the whole world was set. Harmony. Building a harmonious new demon world? Yes, scientific development and harmony of the demon world. This is the strategic policy that the first Demon King guided the demon race to complete together. The first Demon King was really talented and bold, wise and powerful. Without this policy at that time, I'm afraid there would not be the prosperity of the new demon world today. The current Demon King smiled slightly and said, "Prosperity? If you see this scene, would you still think so?" With that, the Demon King stretched out his hand and a crack appeared in the void, revealing the scene of another world. In the blood-red and gloomy world, a withered mountain stood quietly on the ground. However, when Wang Lu took a closer look, he couldn't help but be aghast. That mountain was actually piled up by the corpses of tens of thousands of demons. This is the foundation of the new demon world. The Demon King lightly said, "Hundreds of millions of creatures sleep here forever, maintaining the existence of the new demon world." Chapter 472. Wang Lu still remembered that he had seen an interesting question a long time ago. How could a person prove that he existed? Because there was a prerequisite to this question. You can't prove that anything actually exists, because we can assume that everything around you is an illusion. All your senses are blinded by a brilliant practitioner with magic. What you see, hear, and touch are all illusions and things that don't exist. In this case, you naturally can't prove that anything exists. So, can a person prove that he or she exists? For this question there was once a sage who said, "I think therefore I am." It means that when I think about this question, that is, when I think about it, the thinking itself must exist, and the act of thinking must have a carrier, that is, the existence of the person who thinks, right? Therefore, the existence of my thinking means that I, the carrier, must also exist, so there is I think therefore I am. This truth was not absolute, but at this time it seemed to explain everything that Wang Lu saw. I think therefore I am. The principle of the dream is the same. If there is a dream, there must be a dreamer. A dream world as prosperous and developed as the new demon world must have dreamers who carry the dream. When he guessed that the new demon world was likely to be a dream, Wang Lu began to guess who created this dream. But he did not expect that this person was not a great demon king with an earth-shattering primordial spirit cultivation, but thousands of demons who had once fallen into despair. And seeing the magnificent mountain of corpses displayed by the Demon King, many of Wang Lu's speculations were further confirmed. A harmonious new demon world is good, But suppressing the fighting nature of the demons is ultimately against heaven. So there is the wind of destruction, right? The Demon King said yes. Every once in a while our negative emotions, such as hostility and resentment, which are forcibly suppressed by the new demon world, will erupt. This force is so powerful that it is no less than the power to create the new demon world. It is enough to interfere with the real world. So it forms the black tide that we often talk about. For the slumbering demons, the arrival of the black tide is like a beautiful dream that suddenly turns into a nightmare. Fortunately, when the nightmare ended, the memory of the nightmare would disappear. However, when the dream switched, the new demon world actually did not exist. During this period, all the people who could not switch their dreams synchronously would be swept away by the nightmare. When the nightmare ends, they won't come back. As the Demon King spoke, he looked at Wang Lu. Fortunately, you didn't go too far when the black tide came a few days ago. At that time, the courtyard that you were in was fixed because of your arrival. The places that were further away were completely destroyed when the dream changed. If you had gone too far, you would have been swallowed by the nightmare. Wang Lu smiled and asked the next question. The cycle of sweet dreams and nightmares lasted for 2,000 years. But it shouldn't last forever, right? The Demon King nodded. That is indeed impossible. This beautiful new demon world is ultimately going against the nature of the demon race. It is going against the heavens. The regular outbreak of the black tide is only a temporary solution. In the past 100 years, the arrival of the black tide has become more and more frequent. Probably one day, the black tide will completely devour everything. During this period, we have tried many ways to slow down this process. For example, the large-scale promotion of the lightning ball sport, so that the people of the demon realm pour their passion and blood into the sport to slow down the outbreak of the black tide. You see, those fans who are cheering fanatically on the field, they are unusually excited. In fact, we have deliberately guided them to release a little of the darkness in their hearts. The Demon King said and pointed to the 100,000 fans outside the VIP seats. Wang Lu looked at them and indeed felt that the fans were in an abnormal fanaticism. But this is just a drop in the bucket. The darkness that has accumulated for 2,000 years behind the new demon world has accumulated over time. Wang Lu asked again, then what role did you two play during this period? We are the Watchers. The elder sister said helplessly. During the great catastrophe, not all the demons fell into a deep sleep. In the ruins of the eternal tree, some Watchers, our ancestors, were left behind. The task of the Watchers is to survive in the ruins of the real demon realm, to be the inheritor of the demon realm's civilization, and to monitor the changes in the new demon realm's dream world. This dream world that has gathered hundreds of millions of creatures has unparalleled power. You should remember the black tide that ravaged the demon realm, right? That is the aftermath of the nightmare of hundreds of millions of creatures. The ancestors did not dare to let the dream world develop on its own, so they left us behind. If one day the dream world is on the verge of collapse and make us a big disaster, we will wake up the dream world. So now you are? Wang Lu asked hesitantly. We should be regarded as the fallen. The elder sister explained bitterly. The ancestors left us behind in the hope that we can monitor and balance the dream world. But as the situation of the demon realm got worse and worse, the Watchers became more and more desperate. And this despair will be captured and attracted by the dream world. Hundreds of years ago, there were constantly Watchers who were attracted to the dream world and became a member of the new demon realm. They enjoyed the beautiful dreamlike life and completely forgot the duties of the Watchers. And in our generation, even from the moment we were born, some of us were pulled into the new demon realm and played the corresponding role. We have to rely on the power of the ruins of the eternal tree to barely resist the gravity of the dream world and maintain our self-consciousness. Unfortunately, in order to send you out of the demon realm, we lost the protection of the eternal tree and finally fell completely. At this point, the Watchers in the demon realm are completely extinct. Wang Lu was stunned when he heard this. So it's my fault? The elder sister shook her head and said, even without your appearance, my sister and I would not be able to hold on for a few years. But now that I think about it, maybe we should have let go of our persistence long ago, so that we could enjoy a few more years of beautiful dream world life. But now, the collapse of the new demon realm is not far away. In at most 10 years, the replacement of the new demon realm and the black tide will completely collapse, and this time no one can even wake us up. We can only watch the black tide break out of the cage of the dream world and completely devour everything, including the demon realm and the wider world. Wang Lu waved his hand. "Okay, no need to go so far. Let's get straight to the point. You want us to help, right? You are the only ones who can stop this from happening," the elder sister said. "There are no longer any creatures in the demon realm. We have completely transformed into dream world creatures, and it is impossible for us to wake up and change our fate. But you are different. You are still alive. As long as you can resuscitation from the dream world, it is possible to wake all of us from the outside and end the black tide." "What is the specific method?" Wang Lu said. "The space barrier of the new demon realm is unbreakable. Obviously, it was created by your ancestors to maintain stability when they constructed the dream world. If we want a resuscitation from this dream world, I am afraid we have to cultivate until we reach the shattering realm. If the new demon realm is in its complete state, it is true that only a cultivator who has ascended to the ascension realm can break through the dream world. But there is a flaw in the transition between the new demon realm and the black tide. If you can grasp the flaw, you can break through the dream world and resuscitation in reality." "Grasp the flaw in the transition between the new demon realm and the black tide? How do we do that?" "We are not sure." The elder sister, the great demon king, shook her head irresponsibly. "We are just characters in the dream world. How do we know how to wake up from the dream world? The clues we can provide are only this much. The rest depends on your own efforts." With such an answer, Wang Lu was too lazy to complain. He got up and left. The great demon king then reached out to erase the gray space. Thus, the stop time flowed again, and Wang Lu's ears once again heard the earth-shaking noise. The demon king and the sisters in the VIP seats had disappeared without a trace. When they returned to their original seats, the song and dance performance in the middle of the stadium had not yet ended. ABA and his 4 companions were shouting with red eyes. Their mental state was stimulated by the dancing girls' thighs that were sometimes raised high. They even completely ignored the dignified face of Wang Lu who had returned. "What's wrong?" Zhou Mumu was attentive. She could tell at a glance that Wang Lu had something on his mind. "I just experienced an unexpected romantic encounter." Wang Lu sighed and then told her what happened just now in great detail. When they learned that the essence of the new demon realm was actually a dream world, even the few chief disciples who were experienced and knowledgeable felt that it was inconceivable. But more importantly, how could they seize the gap between the transition between sweet dreams and nightmares? Based on the previous situation, there is indeed a gap between the two dream worlds. After pondering for a long time, Xianghua said, "Previously, when we used the sentry guard to explore the situation outside, we captured the figure of the undead skeleton at the moment when the sentry guard was destroyed. I think that is the flaw that the Demon King mentioned." Wang Lu said, "The timing can be determined, but what do we need to do in that instant to wake up from the dream? This is the problem." "It's very simple." Xianghua once again opened her mouth, seized that moment and used the Kill Immortal sword to cut a path to the 9 regions. Senior Sister Xianghua is really simple and crude. The simplest is often the most effective. Moreover, do you remember how we entered this world? We were originally at the edge of the demon realm, but we were unknowingly pulled into the dream world. It seems that the dream world of the new demon realm has expanded to an incredible level in the past 2,000 years, and it will soon swallow up the entire demon realm. Previously, when we entered the demon realm, we couldn't leave mostly because of this layer of interference. In this case, even if we managed to resuscitation from the dream world, it would be nothing more than returning to the demon realm again, still trapped in the dream world. Therefore, if we want to do it, we must do it in one go, directly break free from the cage of this dream world and return to 9 regions. Wang Lu said, "The idea is a good idea, but Senior Sister Qianghua, if I remember correctly, your Kill Immortal sword is inhabited by the creatures of the demon realm, so it can only cut a path to the demon realm. As for the path to 9 regions, how are you going to cut it?" Qianghua just smiled and said nothing. That smile, however, sent chills down one's spine. Chapter 473. This was the consensus of the several people present. Those who could become the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques were not simple people. They knew very well what could really make a person stand in today's world. Therefore, Wang Lu never cared if people scolded him for having no moral integrity. Zhou Mumu also didn't care if people accused her of being pedantic. And Zhang Zai turned a deaf ear to the curse that he would be single for a lifetime. This was the privilege of being a genius cultivator and the lead disciple. However, now Qianghua showed that she was a person who did not care about trifles, which made people shudder. The meaning hidden behind the smile was actually obvious. The Kill Immortal sword housed hundreds of millions of demon world creatures. Therefore, Qianghua had a way to come to the demon world from 9 regions. At the same time, she certainly would not forget to prepare to go back. In other words, the Kill Immortal sword also housed the creatures of 9 regions. Of course, with Qianghua's temperament and means, she would not kill innocent people. Most of the people who were housed in the sword were evil people. Since her debut, Qianghua had taken the task of killing demons and demons as her duty, and the number of souls that were killed by her sword was already countless. In terms of the number of people killed, except for Xiang Liang, the other 3 lead disciples combined might not even be as many as Qianghua. It was easy to accumulate some souls that could be used to lead the way. However, Wang Lu did not like the indifference shown by Qianghua at this time. Because behind this indifference was Qianghua's incomparably arrogant attitude, which was a contempt for life. This lead disciple fairy seemed to regard herself as a high and mighty ruler. Her mission was to look as far as possible, and the so-called mortals were just a negligible number in her view. And for this kind of idea, Wang Lu was really disgusted because he never liked others to plagiarize his ideas. However, at this point, whether he liked it or disliked it, Qianghua's Kill Immortal sword undoubtedly pointed the way home for the 5 lead disciples. The next question was, should they gamble on this? I think everyone should have no objection to this, right? Wang Lu asked while turning his head to look at the other 4 people. Of course, it was unanimously approved. The next step is to determine the time. I think the next black tide will be a good time. Time is of the essence. Qianghua was the first to support him. I agree. In this new demon world, the longer we stay here, the stronger the binding force will be. After all, our cultivations are still lacking. If we stay here for too long in the King Pill realm, we will inevitably be assimilated. Zhou Mumu spread her hands. Since you've said so, I have no objections. Xiang Liang said concisely, I agree. Zhang Zai was a little reluctant to leave. I really can't bear to leave so soon. There are too many secrets waiting for me to explore. But academic researchers don't act pretentiously. Maybe next time. After the time was set, the 5 of them felt relieved. The biggest problem had been solved. It was a rare time to rest and recuperate before the arrival of the next black tide. During this period of time, he had to adjust himself to his best condition. Hey, the game is about to start. Just when they were ready to seize the time to meditate, Wang Lu suddenly pointed to the center of the field. At this time, the last performing team was quickly walking off the stage. The first match of the league tournament was about to begin. I'm really looking forward to it, Wang Lu said, obviously showing an eager expression. Zhou Mumu curled her lips and said, Hey, aren't you too playful? Qianghua knew Wang Lu better. She smiled and said, Is junior brother Wang Lu planning to seriously observe and learn, and then popularize it when we return to 9 regions? Wang Lu nodded his head. He had to admit that if not for the fact that his position was too different from Qianghua's, the 2 of them were actually quite close friends. Although the essence of this new demon world is just a dream, it is a dream built by hundreds of millions of demons for 2,000 years. In terms of social form, the new demon world is more mature than the 9 regions. Many things here can be regarded as advanced experience, especially the entertainment of the new demon world, which is the crystallization of quite fierce market competition. After returning to 9 regions, as long as some transformation is done according to the local conditions, it will promote a revolution in the entertainment industry. Zhou Mumu looked at Wang Lu somewhat incomprehensibly. It was difficult to understand his theory, and also difficult to understand why he had the leisure to pay attention to the entertainment industry revolution. Not only the lightning ball in the last few days, I will try my best to learn all the advanced experience of the new demon world. Then, when I return to 9 regions, I will finance a new firm from the mysterious Sky Mansion in the name of Wisdom Sect, and then try my best to imitate it. I've even designed the company's mascot. Look, isn't that a penguin? It's a penguin, isn't it cute? By imitating the advanced, Coupled with my big penguin as the symbol, this firm will certainly have a promising future and grow into a large-scale empire. Regarding Wang Lu's beautiful imagination, Zhou Mumu just chuckled. At the same time, she secretly admired this guy's mentality, which was simply unmatched. In any case, in a few days they would have to risk their lives. She really couldn't figure out why this guy wasn't nervous at all. The next match of the Lightning Ball League could be said to be extremely wonderful, which was an eye-opener. The members of the participating team were impressively all demon generals, with the strength of a Taoist master of King Pill in 9 regions. This was also the highest level of confrontation in the multi-level league of the Lightning Ball League. In order to better reflect the confrontation and viewing value, the Lightning Ball League had a strict level definition. Demons with different cultivation level would not be assigned to the same level of competition. In the multi-level league, the demon general level was the highest. It was not that there was no competition with higher strength, but it was just a small exchange between each other, not a public entertainment. And the demon general level competition was also the most exciting. It could be imagined that a group of Taoist masters of King Pill would fiercely fight in the water ball, which was comparable to the Qianni True Water. Each of them would use their wonderful skills to compete for the water ball, and strive to send the water ball to the opponent's goal. The first match of the league went on for a full hour. The longer it went on, the stronger the appeal on the field. In the final stage of the game, even Zhou Mumu, who was not interested in the game, could not help but cheer for the players in the field. In the end, the home team of Xanarkan defeated their most powerful competitor, the Lucca City Star team, with a score of 7-4, which won the applause of the audience and raised the Eternal Shield high. Of course, this was only a special reward for the first victory. The real Eternal Shield would not be given to the winner until the end of the league. After the game, Wang Lu and the others left the field with the crowd. When they returned to their temporary residence, the celebratory atmosphere cooled down a bit. Among them, Zhou Mumu's feelings were the most complicated. If we don't have a clear goal, I think it won't take long for us to get lost here. Wang Lu also sighed. It's indeed a beautiful world that people can't bear to destroy. When it came to this topic, the atmosphere suddenly cooled down. According to the plan, when the black tide came, Qianghua would cut the way with the Kill Immortal sword. And after leaving the new demon world, they still had an important thing to do: wake up the hundreds of millions of sleepers and end the 2,000 years of dream. This was mainly to prevent the spread and outbreak of the black tide. If left unchecked, the black tide would one day engulf everything and bring disaster to 9 regions that was no less than the Great War of Immortals and Demons. However, when the dream resuscitation came, this magnificent civilization that had been developed for 2,000 years would also disappear. Wang Lu planned to set up a business in 9 regions to imitate the entertainment activities of the new demon world. How could he not feel sorry for the scene of destruction and try to leave something behind? In the silence, Qianghua said, "Well, let's go back and rest first and adjust our immortal heart. After a game, I think everyone's mentality is a bit unstable." This time, even Wang Lu did not object. The next black tide would come after a long time. The essence of the black tide was the revival of the killing instinct of the demon race that had been suppressed in the new demon world. However, in the past few days, the Lightning Ball League was a good way to vent the negative feelings accumulated in the new demon world and delayed the time of the next black tide. However, the black tide finally came. The method of using the lightning ball to vent the negative emotions of the demon race was, after all, a temporary solution. In the evening, a mournful horn sounded in the sky, which was a warning issued by the Demon King for his people. When the horn sounded, the demons of the new demon world hid in their homes, and the noisy world suddenly became quiet. At the same time, Wang Lu and the others did the opposite. They walked out of the small courtyard and went all the way out of the city. The guards who usually guarded the city gate had already hidden in the barracks to rest. The huge city gate was actually unguarded, allowing people to come and go. The group of people walked all the way to the wilderness. At this time, the sky was as dark as ink. The starry light that once shone in the night was completely hidden, and the air was filled with a fishy smell, which made people feel depressed. Qianghua took the lead. Her Kill Immortal sword emitted a bloody light in the darkness, which dispelled the depression in everyone's heart. When the black tide came, Qianghua would use the Kill Immortal sword to cut open the space and open a safe passage directly to 9 regions. For this sword strike, Qianghua had previously sacrificed her sword for 3 days and 3 nights, even burning her own innate vitality. The resonance with the Kill Immortal sword had reached its peak at this stage. Just as everyone stood still and prepared to welcome the arrival of the black tide, the sky collapsed. Being wrapped in darkness, this was the most intuitive feeling of the several people. Although it was dark all around and they could not see any change, it was as if there was a world falling rapidly on top of their heads. In the blink of an eye, these several Taoist masters of King Pil would be crushed into powder. However, in this blink of an eye, Qianghua's Kill Immortal sword had already slashed out. The sword light moved forward and went straight to the sky. The sword light bloomed, and the tens of millions of souls wailed in unison. This was the result of Qianghua's illustrious battle of slaying demons and devils. These souls were all extremely vicious and evil when they were alive. After they died, they turned into fierce ghosts in the Kill Immortal sword. Their fierceness was also particularly fierce. As the sword light shone, the tens of millions of souls actually found a point in the void. Go! Qianghua coldly shouted, and the power of the Kill Immortal sword further broke out. The sea of blood that she learned from the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown once again surged out, forcing back the black tide. The other 4 people didn't say anything and immediately walked into the void along with the sword light. Qianghua herself was responsible for bringing up the rear. When Xiang Liang walked into the void, she turned the sword light and the surging sea of blood was taken back into the sword. The black tide, which was stimulated by the sea of blood, rushed over even more violently. However, Qianghua had already closed the space gap at the same time when the sea of blood converged, leaving only a confident back view in the new demon world. Turning around, Qianghua saw a group of people in the gap between worlds. If there were no coordinates here, even a cultivator with great magical ability would fall. However, there was a line under Qianghua's feet, and the other end was in a distant place, which was the direction of 9 regions. Qianghua smiled slightly. Okay, then we just need to... where's Wang Lu? When she took a closer look, Qianghua found that everyone else was there. Only Wang Lu was missing. Chapter 474. Where's Wang Lu? As soon as she noticed that Wang Lu had disappeared, Qianghua felt her heart tightened and quickly asked the others, especially Zhou Mumu. Zhou Mumu, who had the best friendship with Wang Lu, opened her mouth, but she seemed somewhat confused. He disappeared in the blink of an eye. Disappeared. He was the first to enter the void and I was right behind him. However, when I stepped into the void, I could only see half of his body. The other half was hidden in the void, and it looked like he had been split into 2. Then he said to me. When Zhou Mumu said this, she subconsciously swallowed and then said. He said that he forgot something and wanted to go back and get it. None of the 4 people present could say anything. He forgot something and wanted to go back and get it? Could it be that he forgot his brain? Did he know how much Qianghua had paid to find a gap in the new demon world that was known to be forever unbreakable, and cut open this path? In order to open this path, Qianghua herself took the risk of being bitten by the Kill Immortal sword, and the others also exposed themselves to the pressure of the black tide. He almost risked his life to finally seize the opportunity to break through. After escaping from the cage of the new demon world with great difficulty, he actually turned back? After a long time, Qianghua said, Wang Lu habitually does things unexpectedly, but every time he has his own considerations, he will not walk on the road to death. I think this time he should have something that he doesn't want us to know. Zhou Mumu asked, with his thick skin, even if he runs naked in front of us, I'm afraid he won't change his expression. What is it that he needs to hide from all of us? Qianghua did not answer but lightly said, this place is full of void turbulence, so it's not good to stay here for a long time. Moreover, my guiding clue can't last too long, so let's go back to 9 regions first and discuss the other things later. Hey, do you want to leave Wang Lu here? Qianghua asked. Are you willing to stay with him? Zhou Mumu was tongue-tied. Even though her relationship with Wang Lu was good, it was far from the point where they were sworn brothers of life and death. Furthermore, as the lead disciple of Kuan Luan, She could not be so impulsive. But at least he's our teammate. Let's wait for a while. Xianghua said again, do you think his problem can be solved in a short time? If not, what's the point of us waiting here for a while? Zhou Mumu was speechless. The only voice of opposition disappeared, and the itinerary of the four people was set. With Xianghua leading the way with the kill immortal sword, they returned to 9 regions from the turbulent void. The entire journey was silent. The cultivation of the King Pill cultivator was still far from being able to freely travel through the boundless universe. Xianghua also had to rely on a number of immortal sect's supreme treasures to firmly grasp the kill immortal sword. The other 3 followed closely behind, but they also had no time to pay attention to anything else. No one mentioned anything about Wang Lu again. Xianghua, who was walking at the front, sighed silently in her heart. Unlike the others, she more or less guessed the intention of Wang Lu's trip. For him, it would be an extremely difficult choice, but she believed that Wang Lu would be able to complete it well. Although the relationship between the two was not good, Xianghua would never underestimate Wang Lu. He was a teammate who never let people down. On the other side, after separating from the main team, Wang Lu did have a task that he had to complete alone. The familiar land, the familiar air. Setting foot on a bloody plain, Wang Lu could not help but sigh with emotion. Just half a month ago, he broke through the void from 9 regions and came here. He thought that he would see a world with a very different civilization, but as powerful as 9 regions. Unexpectedly, all he could see was a wasteland. Demon world. Wang Lu returned to the demon world. Xianghua cut through the space with the kill immortal sword and opened a path to 9 regions. However, Wang Lu was not in a hurry to return to 9 regions. Instead, he returned to the demon world from the void. Of course, when he entered the demon world, he was once again imprisoned and bound by the special structure of the new demon world. At this time, breathing the familiar air and stepping on the familiar land, Wang Lu could clearly feel that his connection with 9 regions was once again cut off, and all kinds of props, including Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman, had lost their effect. But it didn't matter. This time he was ready to revisit his hometown. The sky was still filled with rolling blood clouds. It stood to reason that when he followed Xianghua to break through the encirclement, the black tide came. However, the black tide was only everywhere in the new demon world and could not completely cover the demon world. At least in a certain place, it was a forbidden area that the black tide would never approach. From the new demon world to the void, and from the void to the demon world, Wang Lu only took 2 steps, but these 2 steps condensed the essence of his cultivation base as Taoist Master King Pill. Each step contained endless calculation, and the use of a considerable number of magical treasures. Otherwise, how could he have arrived at this place from the void in a single step? Wang Lu looked up and saw a mountain in front of him. A mountain piled up by the corpses of thousands of creatures. It was also the main body of the new demon world. Next, Wang Lu whispered to himself and stepped forward. At the same time, he put his right hand into his bosom and clenched the already hot demon jade. Next, it was time to make a choice. He went through a lot of trouble and took a huge risk to come here just for this thing, to awaken the demon race's millennium dream. As long as the demon race's dream was not awakened, the black tide in the dream would continue to brew and expand, and eventually become a disaster that could endanger the 9 regions. However, if he wanted to resuscitate the dream, it meant the destruction of the new demon world. Although it was just a dream, it was the most magnificent dream that Wang Lu had ever seen. If he really wanted to destroy it, Wang Lu couldn't bear it, because it was not a simple dream. After 2,000 years of development, the new demon world had become an independent existence. Everyone in it was a living creature of flesh and blood. Moreover, they were peace-loving, hard-working, and intelligent. In the new demon world, even Xianghua, who was slightly extreme in the face of the division between immortal and demon, could not help but put down her killing intent and could not make a move against the residents. It was really an intoxicating place. But now he had to awaken the dream and make the hundreds of millions of creatures in the new demon world die without a burial place in the collapse of the space. Wang Lu did not want to bear this sin, but now it seemed that he had no choice. Even if he didn't do it himself, after a few years or decades the new demon world would still collapse. Understanding this, Wang Lu immediately suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and continued to move forward. The way to awaken the dream was very simple. As long as he made full use of the ruling effect of the demon jade, it would be enough. Although after the destruction of the eternal tree, the demon jade had lost its effect of ruling the world, Wang Lu believed that for the mountain of corpses in front of him, the demon jade still had some effect. And what he had to do was to order these creatures to wake up. Wang Lu was not sure whether the demon in the black fog in the group of immortal tombs gave him the demon jade for this reason, but now it seemed that it could come in handy. However, just as Wang Lu was about to stimulate the power of the demon jade, an unusually loud voice suddenly sounded under him. I seem to smell a familiar smell. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was stunned and then looked at his feet, because the sound came from his feet. Shay. Enissi, you actually woke up? The howling demon Enissi that he found in the library of Kunlun Immortal Mountain was the trump card that Wang Lu prepared to return to 9 regions from the demon world. However, the situation changed too fast. First, the situation in the demon world was beyond expectation. Later, Wang Lu found out that after entering the demon world, Enissi was in a coma, as if it was in suspended animation, and completely lost its function. This was normal. Enissi was an ancient remnant that lived tens of thousands of years ago. In the current demon world, the laws had collapsed and the atmosphere was in disorder, which was no longer suitable for survival. Especially since the air here seemed to be highly toxic to the demon race, Enissi, who only had a mouth left, naturally could not hold on. He thought that this mouth would be in a coma all the way back to 9 regions or even not wake up. Unexpectedly, it woke up at this time. However, even if it woke up, it would be useless. When Wang Lu was about to ignore Enissi, he heard Enissi exclaim again, "Yes, I do smell the breath of my fellow demon. Master, have we returned to the demon world?" "Yes, this is the smell of the demon world. Although there has been a great change, I will never mistake the smell of my hometown." Feeling the surging under his feet, Wang Lu lifted his foot, and Enissi immediately fluttered in the air like a withered leaf in the wind, cheering. "Ha ha ha, I'm home. I'm finally home." Wang Lu sighed inwardly. Home is indeed home, but with the vicissitudes of life, your hometown has been reduced to ruins. Sure enough, it didn't take long for Enissi's cheers to subside and be replaced by deep doubts. "Master, why do I feel that my hometown seems to have changed a lot? And it's lifeless?" Enissi, who had lost almost all of its physical organs in the battle of immortals and demons, naturally could not see and perceive the earth-shaking changes in the demon world. However, after the ecstasy subsided, it finally noticed the abnormality from its only perception. Wang Lu went straight to the point. "The demon world is finished." "Finished?" Enissi was stunned. After a long time it asked, "Master, you said it's finished. What do you mean?" Wang Lu said faintly, "The eternal tree was destroyed. The laws of heaven and earth of the demon world collapsed, and everyone died." "This is impossible," Enissi exclaimed. "I just smelled the smell of my fellow demon." "Smell again? Didn't you smell the smell of corpses?" Enissi's voice once again became low. Being in front of the mountain of corpses, how could it not smell the strong and almost suffocating corpse smell? It was just that Enissi didn't want to think about this possibility at all. It only focused on the remaining trace of life in the corpse smell. Just when Wang Lu thought that Enissi had accepted its fate, the howling demon roared again. "This is impossible. I don't believe that the demon race will be extinct like this. Flash demon, stand up. I order you to appear in front of me immediately right now." In the demon world 10,000 years ago, the flash demon was regarded as the subordinate race of the howling demon. They would obey the call of the main race. However, in the current demon world, how could there be any flash demon that could respond to the call? "Flash demon, are you going to rebel?" "I'm back, it's me." Enissi roared with all its might. After a while, blood spilled out of its mouth, but it still refused to stop. Then, "Miss Demon, where is the Miss Demon? Miss Demon, come out. You can't be extinct like this. I know you are still alive, come out." Boom! Enissi's roar pierced through the sky, and the fire clouds in the sky were shaken away by the roar. The howling demon really lived up to its reputation. But no matter how loud the roar was, could it bring the dead back to life? Just as Wang Lu shook his head, He suddenly saw a bump on the mountain of corpses in front of him trembled slightly. A corpse that had been sleeping for 2,000 years suddenly stood up. Chapter 475. Wang Lu really felt that it was an eye-opener. It was not uncommon for the dead to come back to life, but it was rare for a corpse that had been dead for 2,000 years to be awakened by a roar. What's more, it was awakened by the roar. And it was a demon that should have been sleeping forever. This was simply resurrection from the dead. Enissi, as the magical ability of the Howling clan, was indeed not a trivial matter. However, Wang Lu was more interested in what happened next. On the corpse mountain, no one knew whether it was a coincidence or some other reason, but a corpse responded to Enissi's call and resuscitation from its sleep. Resuscitation of a single person did not have any effect on the new demon realm. The rest of the corpses were still in a long sleep. On the corpse mountain, this upright corpse seemed abnormally conspicuous. Enissi noticed its resuscitation, and it immediately floated over and came to the front of the corpse. Sure enough, someone is still alive. You, quickly tell me what happened to the demon realm? At this time, Enissi didn't even care about the existence of its master. And Wang Lu didn't mind. He just strolled to the corpse mountain and came to the side of the corpse. Under such circumstances, it was really incredible that someone could resurrect the dead. This corpse must be a great person when it was alive. However, it could be seen that this was only the final radiance of the setting sun, because after leaving the corpse mountain dream, this tall corpse was rotting at an alarming rate. However, before it completely rotted, it still had the ability to speak. Demon realm. The consciousness of the corpse that was just resuscitation was still a little fuzzy. After a while, it sighed faintly. The demon realm no longer exists. Hearing this, Enissi finally gave up its fantasy, and its whole body became sluggish. Seeing that there was no other problem, the corpse that was awakened was ready to fall back to sleep. However, Enissi suddenly asked, "Did we lose?" "Yes," the corpse replied calmly. "I see." Enissi's voice was bitter. He only had his mouth left, and he didn't even have eyes. Naturally, there was no tearful scene, but the pain in his voice was empathizing. Did we resist until the last moment? Even though we've lost, we're still glorious warriors, aren't we? Hearing this question, the corpse hesitated for a moment before replying. We didn't resist to the end because it was too unwise. Enissi was stunned when he heard that. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. You're saying we didn't resist to the end? Because it's unwise? What do you mean by that? The corpse briefly explained the cataclysm that happened 2,000 years ago, and then concluded, in short, in the face of the crisis of the entire demon world, there is no point in showing off one's courage. So in the end, we created a dream together and built a new kingdom in the dream. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. This is utterly ridiculous. Enissi angrily interrupted him. What do you mean by the courage of an ordinary man is meaningless? What did he mean by resisting to the end was unwise? Such words are simply a disgrace to the fiend race. This is the consensus of all of us. However, the corpse was very calm. When there is a chance of victory, fighting bravely is worth advocating. But if you have no chance of winning at all, you should choose to give up wisely. Then hide in your dreams and be a coward for the rest of your life? What the hell are you? You are definitely not the fiend race, because I don't believe that my descendants will become such trash. In the past, even if we faced an opponent that was impossible to defeat, we still held our heads high until the last moment. Because that is the attitude that the fiend race should have. The corpse was somewhat puzzled. But that's not rational. Rational? That's a toy that humans are interested in. The fiend race never needs any rationality. What we need is honor and dignity. Enissi kept roaring, and because of its hoarse voice, it kept spitting out blood from its mouth. But it didn't intend to stop at all. Who made the decision? Who dares to lead the fiend race into such a humiliating path? Let him come out to see me. The resurrected corpse was obviously a little embarrassed and stood motionless in the same place. Call your leader out to see me. While roaring, Enissi began to spit out blood. Obviously, its power didn't allow it to be so violent, but it was also obvious that it didn't care about its own life and death. In the end, until Enis's strength was exhausted and it fell to the ground unwillingly, the Corpse Mountain's leader didn't appear. Even the corpse that was awakened by the roar turned into ashes under the collapse of the law, leaving no useful clues. Enis was lying on the ground, dying, but its mouth was still murmuring, I don't believe that this is the end. Hiding in the dream to continue the civilization? That's a joke. Master, tell me this is not the end. Wang Lu sighed softly. Of course this is not the end. Everything has just begun. Is that so? Then I'm relieved. We, the fiend race, should not be so cowardly. After saying that, the noisy howling race finally fell silent. And Wang Lu fell into a long silence. Previously, letting Enis out was purely a matter of convenience. He didn't think too much about it, but after Enis finished its roar, Wang Lu had a doubt in his mind. 2,000 years ago, facing the crisis of life and death, the fiend race chose to hide in the dream. It was a good move, but now it seemed that there were indeed many things that couldn't be explained. Wang Lu didn't dare to say that he had a deep understanding of the fiend race, but from the records of the two great wars of immortals and demons, at least one thing was clear: the fiend race was a particularly unyielding creature. Even the relatively cunning and changeable races were no exception. So, in the face of the collapse of the demon realm, these creatures who would rather die than fight actually wisely chose not to fight. From a human's point of view, hiding in the dream was understandable, but Enis's roar before its death made Wang Lu more aware that he couldn't measure the behavior of the fiend race by human standards. From the perspective of the fiend race, in the face of a desperate situation, the normal choice should be to fight to the end until death. As for turning over and hiding in the dream, it was really not in line with their aesthetics. Of course, among the hundreds of millions of fiend race creatures, it was inevitable that there would be a few exceptions. However, the towering mountain of corpses in front of him was obviously the path that the vast majority of the hundreds of millions of fiend race creatures chose. This was indeed a bit abnormal. After realizing the problem, Wang Lu fell into a deeper contradiction. As a professional adventurer, it was impossible for him to turn a blind eye to an important branch in front of him. However, at this time he didn't want to complicate the issue, especially this branch, which was a bit too difficult for him at present. He had just been promoted to Taoist Master King Pil, so he couldn't bear the responsibility of finding the truth of the world. Wang Lu paced back and forth on the mountain of corpses. After hesitating for a long time, he still couldn't make a decision. This was really rare for Wang Lu, who had always been decisive. In Spirit Sword Mountain, he wouldn't even blink an eye if he took the initiative to report his master's evil deeds to the sect leader. But now it was really difficult to make a choice. Originally, I just wanted to call for a bed. I didn't intend to go deep into it. Finally, Wang Lu looked up and sighed. Then the sword of Mount Kuan drilled out of his palm and waved it twice in the air. Sword chi crisscrossed and bombarded the mountain of corpses, but it only aroused layers of ripples. This mountain of corpses that had existed for 2,000 years had evolved into a very high-level magical treasure, which was impervious to all kinds of evil and invulnerable to all kinds of methods. With Wang Lu's current cultivation base, he could hardly shake it. Moreover, after the collapse of the Eternal Tree, the effect of the demon jade was also greatly reduced, and the only thing that could resonate with it was the howling race that died of exhaustion. Wang Lu really didn't want to take the risk. However, what was the old saying? Do you want to be a coward for a lifetime? Or do you want to be a hero, even if it only lasts for a few seconds? Although Wang Lu didn't think that a person who could only last for a few seconds was qualified to be called a hero, but in the face of such a big mystery, he could not suppress his desire to explore. With a strong curiosity, Wang Lu pointed the tip of the sword downward. The primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi condensed into a point, but it didn't shoot out. Instead, it continued to surge, making the sword chi sharper. Then Wang Lu gently inserted the tip of the sword into the gap between several corpses that were almost glued together. The long-awaited sword strike broke the gap between the corpses without any suspense. Then the sword of Mount Kuan forcefully flicked it, and with the all-conquering sharpness of the heaven-splitting sword chi, it opened a gap in the mountain of corpses. At the same time, an earth-shattering shock force came from the mountain of corpses. Wang Lu hastily took out the demon jade and put it in front of him. This once supreme treasure of the demon realm still played some role, offsetting the shock force of the mountain of corpses. And Wang Lu took this opportunity to go deeper, and completely drilled into the mountain of corpses. He wanted to find a person in the mountain of corpses, a guide who had led hundreds of millions of demons on the wrong path, the great demon king who had ruled the demon realm for 2,000 years. After the conversation between Hennessy and the demon's soul, Wang Lu already had too many riddles waiting to be solved, and the corpse of the demon king from 2,000 years ago was the first step for Wang Lu to solve the riddle. Just now, while walking, he had already detected the location of the demon king's corpse, right in the center of the mountain of corpses, surrounded by hundreds of millions of demons, like stars surrounding the moon. That was the burial place of the demon king. This mountain of corpses was like a mausoleum made of corpses. Among the hundreds of millions of demons, only the demon king had a burial place. This was also a doubtful point. Moving forward in the mountain of corpses was difficult. Even with the protection of the demon jade, Wang Lu still had to face all kinds of visions. After all, this was the demon king's mausoleum that was far more terrifying than any tomb in the world. Hundreds of millions of creatures were buried together with him. Merely the resentment and hatred of those buried together could form a raging black tide in the demon realm. In 9 regions, there was often a legend about the ghost blowing out the lamp among tomb robbers. Wang Lu laughed at himself as he walked. If there were ghosts in this mountain of corpses, it would not just be the wandering ghosts, but the ghost tide? Would that be the ghost's lamp? Fortunately, that scene that was not suitable for children did not happen. Under the protection of the demon jade, Wang Lu, relying on his non-phase sword defense, opened a path. He finally saw the coffin of the demon king. The demon king was indeed worthy of being called the demon king. The treatment he received was far different from the others. At the core of the mountain of corpses, the demon king had an independent room. Thousands of tall and burly demons carried him on their backs. Their backs formed the flat floor, walls, and roof. On the 4 walls, poems and essays were engraved to the demon king. Based on his understanding of the demon race's characters, Wang Lu could see that the last demon king of the demon race had established a good achievement in just a few decades. Therefore, he also enjoyed a very high prestige in the demon world. Even his words carried enormous weight, which was why he could make hundreds of millions of demons follow him. At the same time, there was also a portrait of the demon king on one of the walls. He could vaguely see that it was Lan's kindred. He had a red face and fangs, and a long tail swayed behind him. It was just that, compared to Lan, this demon king was thin and small. Only his pair of hourglass-like pupils showed that he was different. Looking at this portrait, Wang Lu was a bit lost in thought. But soon he shook his head and no longer paid attention to it. The inside of this mountain of corpses was not a place to stay for a long time, and there was no need to look at the remains of the dead. The key problem was, Wang Lu took a few steps forward, reached out his hand, grabbed the cover of the demon king's coffin, and then forcefully opened it. Inside it was empty. Chapter 476. Facing the empty coffin, Wang Lu was silent for a long time and sighed helplessly. Sure enough, it's a lie. Before entering the mountain of corpses, Wang Lu began to doubt the identity of the last demon king. No matter how many amazing achievements he had made during his reign, there were 2 undeniable problems. First, the eternal tree of the demon realm collapsed during his tenure. Second, in the face of desperation, he led hundreds of millions of demons to make a choice that went against common sense. No matter how many eulogies there were for such a leader, it was worth questioning. After all, this kind of thing was not uncommon for Wang Lu. In Wang Lu's experience, he had seen too many similar situations. On the one hand, he fooled the people into dedicating everything for the great goal, but on the other hand, he quietly prepared a way out. Among the so-called leaders, such goods could be said to emerge endlessly. The demon world was vast, so it was not unusual for it to occasionally produce one. It was a pity that according to the portrait, this leader was handsome even by human standards. He did not have a head, which was more in line with his own impression, As for why he coincidentally met such a person among the last demon kings, it was very simple. Because once such a person appeared on the throne of the demon realm, he was basically destined to be the last demon king. However, looking at the empty coffin, Wang Lu was still a little uneasy. What happened 2,000 years ago? Is it really that simple? Because the demon king did not rule well, the eternal tree was destroyed, and the demons were led astray and fell into a long dream. Is that it? Unfortunately, no matter how many questions there were now, there was no way to verify it. The coffin was empty, and there were no valuable clues left. As for the eulogies on the surrounding walls, there was basically no reading value. A leader who could lead the most valiant and warlike race to their dreams naturally wouldn't leave any black marks in the history books for himself. Leaving a name in the history book was a common problem of that kind of person. So next, are you going to wake up? The mystery that he wanted to solve the most could not be solved, so Wang Lu could only settle for the next best thing and began to perform the secondary task, awaken the Millennium Dream and solve the problem of the Black Tide. In the opening ceremony of the new Demon World Lightning Ball League, Wang Lu had already begun to prepare for this. Now it was almost imperative to carry it out, but Wang Lu couldn't make up his mind to do it immediately. What he had seen and heard in the new demon world for half a month was unforgettable to him. The dreamland built by the demon race for 2,000 years was simply a miracle. If that magnificent and brilliant civilization was destroyed like this, Wang Lu would really feel sad. He actually quite liked watching lightning balls. Choosing to destroy everything was the simplest, but it was also the most disdainful thing for Wang Lu. Therefore, he chose a more difficult path. Wang Lu could not allow the black tide in the new demon world to continue to expand and eventually become a natural disaster that threatened the 9 regions. Therefore, his next job was to find a way to eliminate this black tide. That was easier said than done. The new demon world was full of geniuses. For 2,000 years, no one could eliminate the black tide. On the contrary, because of the expansion of the new demon world, the power of the black tide continued to grow. Wang Lu alone, in the face of the power of the whole world, was simply not worth mentioning. Even with the help of the demon jade, Wang Lu could not directly fight against the black tide. Even if the eternal tree was still there, and the demon jade still had the magical effect of controlling all things in the demon world, it was impossible to eliminate the evil thoughts in the hearts of the hundreds of millions of creatures in the demon world with just one jade. If the demon jade was so easy to use, the demon race would have already exterminated the human race during the First Great War of Immortals and Demons. However, this was not an unsolvable problem. In the process of slowly walking out of the mountain of corpses in the tomb, Wang Lu had already built a general framework of the plan. In his view, things were still promising. The cause of the black tide was the collection of negative emotions that accumulated unconsciously after the creatures of the new demon world were forcibly harmonized. For 2,000 years, the people of the new demon world had never discovered that the world they lived in had castrated many things in their nature. Without realizing this, naturally, there was no way to solve the problem of the black tide. This was the case of the onlooker being blinded. Otherwise, with the current civilization accumulation of the new demon world, with its many strong people, could it really not solve the problem of the black tide? The biggest problem was that they were not aware of the existence of the problem. According to this line of reasoning, it seemed that it would be very easy for Wang Lu to solve the problem. As long as the residents of the new demon world were aware of the problem, it seemed that the problem would be easily solved. But after a little thought, he knew that it was a dead end. If the residents of the new demon world suddenly learned that they lived in a world that suppressed their instincts, then it was easy for them to think that the essence of this world might be a dream. Then they would suddenly wake up and the dream would shatter. Since Wang Lu did not want to wake them up, he could not use such a straightforward way. So he planned to do it more carefully and transform the setting of the new demon world from the perspective of outsiders. The emergence of the black tide from another perspective could also be understood as a problem of the survival of a country without external aggression. The demon race was a group of natural masochists. If they were not burned black and blue by the flames of war, their thoughts would not be clear. The environment of the new demon world was too peaceful, so it was not suitable for survival at all. In that case, He would create a little turbulence in the new demon world and let them enjoy themselves. Of course, with Wang Lu's current cultivation, it was still impossible for him to directly interfere with the dream, especially a world that was very close to the real world. It was really difficult for Wang Lu to intervene. But he had the demon jade. Thinking of this, Wang Lu only felt that the demon jade in his hand released an unprecedented amazing heat, as if it was also responding to him, pointing out the correct path. Very good. Next, let us be the saviors of the world together. Then, he held the demon jade in his left hand and spread out a scroll in his right hand. The scroll was drawn by Lu Li, the sixth elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall. It could copy most of the talismans, manuals, and pictures in an instant, and even the effects of them could be inherited. Wang Lu used this scroll to make a copy of a painting in the Demon King's mausoleum, and reproduced it in front of him. That painting depicted the legendary secret technique, used by the Demon King 2,000 years ago, the dream-building technique. Due to the time limit, it was impossible for Wang Lu to master this secret method inherited from the royal family of the demon world in a short period of time. However, he also didn't need to master it. It was enough for him to know how to influence the new demon world, this behemoth. And this part of the content was recorded in great detail on the murals. The demon race 2,000 years ago had a very high degree of trust in the Demon King at that time. The new demon world they built operated independently, and was not affected by external forces, but the Demon King was given special treatment, giving him the highest management authority. As long as he operated according to the method recorded on the murals, he could directly influence the fundamental laws of the new demon world. In simple terms, as long as the Demon King thought about it, he could double the gravity of the new demon world, and could dry up the spiritual energy of the new demon world. And these drastic changes that changed the world were actually operated by hundreds of millions of sleepers. The Demon King himself did not even need to do anything. Wang Lu was not the Demon King 2,000 years ago, but with the demon jade in his hand, he could make a temporary cameo. Of course, it was impossible for Wang Lu to manipulate all the laws of the new demon world as freely and meticulously as the Demon King himself. However, he only needed a slight adjustment. He wanted to release a spell throughout the new demon world. A spell that made people unable to fall into a deep sleep to escape from reality, and the time to cast the spell was when the wind of destruction came. He wanted the residents of the new demon world to face the black tide. Chapter 477. In the past 2,000 years, the demons of the new world of devils had never really faced their dark side. Every time the black tide came, they would hide in the city and sleep like ostriches. Occasionally, there would be challengers, but they would also be destroyed by the resentment of hundreds of millions of creatures. However, now Wang Lu intended to reverse this situation in one fell swoop. He wanted the demons of the new demon world to wake up from their slumber and face the black tide head-on, so that they could witness with their own eyes what kind of terrifying beast was bred in their heart. Then, the demons of the new world of devils would personally destroy the ghosts in the black tide. For 2,000 years, there was neither internal nor external trouble in the new demon world. Now Wang Lu wanted to give them a big external trouble, which just so happened to give this group of idle demon race people who could only vent their wild nature through the lightning ball. And as they gradually invested more energy in fighting against the ghosts of the black tide, the power of the black tide would naturally decrease. Under this situation, the seemingly unstoppable black tide might really be suppressed by the demons of the new world of devils. Of course, in the process, the new world of devils would suffer a terrible blow. The dream civilization that had lasted for 2,000 years would also fall from the clouds and become more real. But this was the best result. Was it better than being swallowed by the black tide unknowingly? Was it better than being suddenly awakened by the demon jade, and the collapse of all civilizations in an instant? This was the best of both worlds plan that Wang Lu came up with. Originally, he only had a rough idea in his mind, but he faced many difficulties when he actually put it into practice. But the dream-building technique that he found on the mausoleum murals was like a catalyst that made his prototype quickly mature. Wang Lu sat cross-legged on top of the mountain of corpses. In front of him was an open picture scroll. The densely packed text and graphics rapidly changed as his gaze shifted. However, no matter how much time passed, there would always be new content on the picture scroll. The text and pictures on the 1-foot square picture scroll seemed to be endless. The dream-building technique was a broad and profound knowledge. In Wang Lu's eyes, it was almost no less than the treasure of the Lingjian school, the Star Sword Book. With Wang Lu's level of comprehension, it was impossible for him to learn anything in a short period of time. However, he didn't need to learn that much. As his gaze swept up and down, the contents of the scroll changed rapidly before finally stopping at a certain section. Wang Lu sighed softly. This was the place. If translated literally, it was the king's edict, and according to Wang Lu's understanding, it was the administrator's manual. The relevant chapters were all about how an administrator should give orders to the new realm of devils, and then let this huge machine run on its own and deploy power to achieve the desired effect. The administrator's instructions were so complicated that they could almost form a separate language. However, Wang Lu only focused on the main points and quickly grasped the content he wanted. After that, there was no time to practice. It was time to put it into practice. Wang Lu pressed his hands on the surface of the mountain of corpses, and his primordial spirit slowly sank along the joints of his body. When he touched the mountain of corpses, he felt a tremendous force that almost made his soul scatter. Wang Lu immediately said the administrator's password, and the invincible force turned into a spring breeze, gently wrapping Wang Lu's primordial spirit. With his divine sense, Wang Lu found that he had come to the new realm of devils again, but this time it was from the perspective of God. He was above the clouds, and the whole new realm of devils could be seen. At the same time, countless vague figures and numbers appeared in front of him, which were all kinds of data of the whole new realm of devils, including the total population of the new realm of devils, the population statistics according to the realm of strength, and many constant settings of the new realm of devils. Wang Lu couldn't even understand most of the content. According to Wang Lu's own expectation, it would take at least a month to understand this administrator's function. How could he waste a month here? So he decided to take a crude and simple approach, directly skipping all the relevant prelude parts of the instructions, starting from the actual operation, and then directly practicing according to the examples provided in the manual. To put it bluntly, the new realm of devils was not his home after all, so what if he broke it? Thinking so, Wang Lu calmed his mind and began to input the administrator's instructions step by step according to the example. The original version of the instructions was written in the demon language, and it was also the royal family's exclusive cold language. Wang Lu was not familiar with this language, so he had to input it in the way he was familiar with first, and then translate it. As for the possible errors, he could only leave it to fate. As soon as the command was issued, Wang Lu only felt that there was a flash in front of him, as if there was a tremendous force that could not be resisted flowing around him, falling down, and covering the whole new realm of devils. And the residents of the new realm of devils who were affected by this energy all felt the top of their heads cool, as if they were enlightened, making them 100 times more energetic and full of energy. Many of the demons who had been tired for several days and were drowsy were instantly full of energy, as if they had been resurrected on the spot. And those demons who were sound asleep on the bed jumped up directly, looking around in disbelief, wondering if they were confused from sleep. Of course, there were also many side effects. Some demons were meditating in seclusion, in a state where they seemed to be asleep but not really asleep. When the auspicious sign suddenly fell from the sky, their breathing suddenly became erratic, and they were in unbearable pain. There were even some who were seriously injured and vomited blood because of this. The relevant detailed statistical report immediately appeared in front of Wang Lu. Looking at the huge number of casualties, even Wang Lu could not help but sweat a little. God mode was not fun. This kind of crude and one-size-fits-all command, even a simple awakening spell, would cause drastic changes in the world, causing heavy casualties. As for the follow-up effects of the incident, it was even more far-reaching and lasting. After the spell was launched, the strong people of the new realm of devils reacted immediately. The two demon king sisters looked up at the sky at the same time, their sharp eyes almost meeting Wang Lu's. Wang Lu immediately stopped. If he continued to play, he was afraid that people would soon find out the abnormality, and then wake up to the nature of the new realm of devils. At that time, if the dream resuscitation, his entire plan would be in vain. And because the method of casting the spell was too rough, the entire structure of the world became unstable. A large number of error interface appeared on the control panel, and eye-catching red crosses almost filled the vision. But this experiment also proved that the command was effective. Next time, as long as the same command was entered when the black tide came, all the problems should be solved. Should be able to. The next black tide came very quickly. Perhaps because of the previous awakening experiment, it brought heavy psychological pressure to the demons of the new realm of devils. So just half a day later, in the evening, the horn of the Demon King sounded in the sky. The black tide was coming. At the same time, Wang Lu, who was in God mode, also received a large number of warning messages. If translated in a free translation, it would be, "The dream system is processing an important process, do not turn off the system." Soon the sky darkened and darkness covered the sky. The demons hid under the protection of the city according to the rules that had been passed down for 2,000 years. Most of them chose to rest, and a few planned to work overtime in their rooms, but when the black tide came, everyone would actually be forced to fall into a deep sleep and cease to exist. This state of disappearance was not the same as ordinary sleep, so it was not certain whether Wang Lu's awakening spell would work perfectly. But at present, this was the only command he could use to cast the spell. The same command as half a day ago appeared in Wang Lu's mind. When the time came, the command would be activated and the spell would be used to wake up the whole realm. Then the black tide finally came. The appearance of the black tide was very abrupt. A moment ago, Wang Lu was still reviewing the command code in his mind, and the next moment, the black tide silently enveloped the entire new demonic realm. At the same time, hundreds of millions of creatures in the new demonic realm began to fall into a deep sleep. Those who were already lying in bed with their eyes closed suddenly heard the sound of snoring. Those who did not sleep all night also fell asleep unknowingly. The next morning they would resuscitation full of energy, and then completely forget that they had fallen asleep. And when the demons fell asleep, their bodies also began to fade, connected to the whole world, and hid when the black tide came. And at this moment, Wang Lu decisively issued a command. The red alert interface filled the field of vision in an instant, and it was stacking up at an alarming rate. The supreme place where Wang Lu was also shaking, and the mountains were shaking. The command to wake up at this critical moment of the arrival of the black tide was a rude command that had never been issued in the 2,000 years of operation of the new demonic realm. And for Wang Lu, who issued the command, the world had begun to silently express its rejection. But Wang Lu did not care at all, because no matter how much this dream rejected him, as long as he was still the orthodox lord of the demonic realm with the demonic jade in his hand, his command would be implemented. Those demons who had fallen asleep were forcibly awakened, and their figures appeared again from the void. And at this time the black tide had officially arrived. Pale skeletons and rotten zombies had filled the entire world. And then, unexpectedly, the resuscitation of the demons. If it was a small number of demons' resuscitation, then it was nothing more than a few missing people in the huge new demonic realm. But when the hundreds of millions of demons in the new demonic realm all resuscitation, it meant the beginning of a war. What is this? In a small border city of the new demonic realm, the guards on the city wall were trembling as they looked at the vast army of skeletons outside the city, and then immediately struggled out of their fear and resolutely sounded the alarm. After a while, several demon generals flew to the top of the city wall. Some of them were even stained with blood. They had experienced a short but fierce battle on the way and killed their opponents. However, after seeing the undead outside the city, they realized that the battle they had experienced was not worth mentioning at all. Quickly send an urgent report to His Majesty the Demon King, say. No need, I already know. Halfway through the demon general's words, an indifferent woman's voice interrupted. And hearing the woman's voice, all the demon generals knelt on one knee. Greetings, Your Majesty the Demon King. The contemporary great demon king, who ruled the new demonic realm, actually came to this border city silently. However, several demon generals soon discovered that it was only a clone of the demon king who came here. All the cities in the new demonic realm are experiencing the same situation as you. The great demon king explained lightly. Several demon generals asked incredulously, all the cities? "Your Majesty the Demon King, what the hell is going on? Where the hell did these souls come from? What should we do?" For a time there was a lot of noise. Although the demon generals were strong after all, they had not experienced the baptism of war, so they quickly fell into panic. At this time, the Demon King's clone spoke again. "We don't need to care about what they are, where they come from. While speaking, the clone raised his right hand, and in the pitch-black steel glove, blazing flames were burning. At the same time, outside the city, where the army of skeletons was most concentrated, the ground within a radius of about 10 miles began to tremble like water waves, and a lone peak suddenly rose from the ground, like a long spear piercing through the huge army of the undead. At the top of the lone peak, lava burst out, and a blazing torrent of destruction flowed from the top of the mountain, sweeping away thousands of soldiers. The whole process took less than 10 minutes, and the army of skeletons that made the guards tremble was melted by the eruption of lava. Then the Demon King's clone withdrew his right hand, which was almost in a state of incandescence, and said softly, "We just need to crush them." Chapter 478. Wang Lu did not see with his own eyes how the Supreme of the Demon Realm transformed into hundreds of incarnations, descended to the cities of the Demon Realm, and crushed the army of the dead with supreme power. Because before the great Demon King's incarnation arrived, he had already been ejected by the system. When the Black Tide arrived, he released a worldwide spell. Wang Lu only lasted for a moment in the Supreme Land before he was ejected by the system. He was ejected to protect himself because the moment Wang Lu left, the Supreme Land was crushed into pieces. The fall of the Supreme Land stunned Wang Lu for a moment, and then he laughed. The Supreme Land was actually the administrator's account, and because of Wang Lu's violent operation, the system was in chaos, and even the administrator's account was crushed. This meant that the new demon realm had entered an unprecedented state of chaos. No one could manipulate this dream at will, and the spells that had been forcibly added to make up for the peace had also been broken. The instincts that had been suppressed for 2,000 years began to return, and the residents of the new demon realm could respond correctly at the first moment. If it was the new demon realm in a normal state, when faced with a sky full of dead souls, the first reaction would be to find someone to greet them and invite them to their home as a guest. Only when the blood of the dead flowed like a river would they remember to resist bravely, and the resistance would be limited to self-defense, and they would never take the initiative to attack a race that had been peaceful for 2,000 years would be so slow to this point. But thanks to the collapse of the Supreme Land, the shackles in the hearts of the demons were broken, so they could respond correctly like the real demons. No matter who they were, where they came from, since they were not pleasing to the eye and might be a threat to themselves, then they would crush them first. As for the negotiation, they would wait until the opponent was beaten to the point where they could not fight back, and their murderous nature had been mostly vented. Wang Lu did not see the subsequent development of the new demon realm, but he could more or less guess. The two great demon kings were powerhouses of the supreme level, and the demon lords and demon generals under their command were also elite troops. In addition, the new demon realm had 2,000 years of accumulation, so they still had the power to resist the Black Dynasty. Although it would be difficult at the beginning, the situation would become smoother as time went on. After all, the source of the Black Tide had been cut off. Of course, when it came to the change of a world, Wang Lu could not predict it with 100% accuracy. Perhaps later on the Black Tide would have a new change, and in turn it would devour the new demon world. But until this point, Wang Lu had done his best. Next, we can finally go home, right? Wang Lu stood up from the mountain of corpses, dusted off the corpse energy on his clothes, and prepared to go home. The new demon world had been messed up by him, so the space blockade had weakened. Now he could feel the location of 9 regions through the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman. Although it was difficult to directly penetrate the multi-layer space barrier and return to 9 regions with just one Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman alone, but he had more than one Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman in his hand. Wang Lu took out all the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talismans from his mustard seed bag and lined them up in a row. Without being stimulated, the immortal spirit energy contained in them was connected into a bundle, bursting out with amazing power. Humph! If Wang Wu saw this, she probably wouldn't be able to resist it for even a moment. She would immediately kneel down and beg me to share half of it with her. While saying that, Wang Lu took back 5 of them. According to his estimation, when the space barrier had been completely loosened, returning to 9 regions didn't need to be so wasteful. 5 heavenly talismans were more than enough. If he used too many, it might brew space turbulence, which would have the opposite effect. The next thing to do is to think about how to explain it to the sect's elders. Wang Lu's trip to the demon world was strongly supported by the sect. Whether it was the painstaking special training of Elder Lu Li, or the special materials prepared for him by the Heavenly Sword Hall, behind all of these were actually the sect's deep expectations for his trip to the demon world. They were looking forward to his growth, and also looking forward to his harvest in the demon world. However, at this time it seemed that if he wanted to say growth, there was not much growth. In total, his trip to the demon world lasted for less than a month, and he didn't even fight against a few decent opponents. Of course, it was difficult for him to make great progress. However, when it came to the harvest, it was very rich. The scroll that recorded the dream-building technique alone could be called priceless. Although Wang Lu himself didn't like it, there were so many inner and outer court disciples in Spirit Sword Mountain, so there would always be someone suitable for cultivation. In addition, the demon jade was also a priceless treasure. Even without the assistance of the eternal tree, it had lost most of its effect, but its structure still contained a high research value. Then it successfully resolved a major disaster for 9 regions, which was a boundless merit. Finally, witnessing the experience and lessons of the demon race in the past 2,000 years would also be of great benefit to the people of 9 regions. Wang Lu intended to go back and write a book. The title of the book was Be Prepared for Danger in Times of Peace, 2,000 Years Sacrifice for the Fall of the Demon World. Then in the book he intended to reveal some secrets in due time, such as the existence of the 3,000 great worlds, such as the fall of the demon race, such as an unknown threat that made Dixian afraid, and the immortals and demons joined hands to face. He believed that there must be people in 9 regions who already knew these secrets. For example, the several elders of Heavenly Sword Hall should know more than him, but they were good at pretending to be stupid. However, these big shots would always have a reason not to reveal these secrets. That being the case, he would do it himself. He was the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect. Although he was already a Taoist master of the King Pill, he had been cultivating for less than 30 years, so he was still a junior in the immortal cultivation world. There were many things that he could do without scruples. Moreover, if some things were really secrets that couldn't be said, then as the lead disciple, he should be told in advance. The more secrets that couldn't be said, the more they couldn't be concealed. Thinking of this, Wang Lu wanted to laugh out loud. It had been a long time since his mind was so scattered. The excitement of going home could not be suppressed. Then Wang Lu took a deep breath and stimulated the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman. According to the effect of the Heavenly Talisman, as long as he could pass through the layers of void and return to the 9 regions, after the Heavenly Talisman flashed, the scene in front of Wang Lu quickly distorted. According to his past experience, the scene in front of him would first shrink to a point, and then quickly unfold. And the unfolded scene should be the non-phase peak of Spirit Sword sect. Buzz. When the scene of the demon world was reduced to a point, Wang Lu suddenly felt that his line of sight was a bit blurred. A dark cloud floated over from nowhere and covered that point. This time Wang Lu was shocked. The space conversion caused by the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman was actually disturbed by an external force? What kind of means could interfere with the operation of the Heavenly Talisman? Moreover, this dark cloud came and went like a ghost, and he didn't notice it at all. Was there an expert who deliberately plotted against him? Or did he miss something when he calculated the way back home? No, the most important question now was, if the space conversion process was disturbed, could he still go back? The worst-case scenario was that he would be lost in the void forever. If he was lucky, he would be transferred to any place in 9 regions. Of course, it was not too good, because there were many mysterious places in 9 regions, and the cultivation base of King Pill was not particularly safe. Therefore, when Wang Lu noticed the abnormality, he immediately took out the 5 spare talismans. As soon as there was an obvious problem, he would immediately activate it and open another space passage. The next moment, the contracted space point stretched again. Wang Lu was slightly stunned and then put down his hand, because the scene that unfolded was a piece of green mountains and clear water, and the surrounding was filled with light and abundant spiritual energy. Although he didn't recognize where it must be somewhere in 9 regions. It seemed that although the process of the spatial transformation was disrupted, there were no major mistakes. As long as he returned to 9 regions, the problem would be mostly solved, because as long as he was still in 9 regions, the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman was a trustworthy life-saving talisman. And Wang Lu didn't hesitate. After seeing the scene clearly, he immediately took out a heavenly talisman and stimulated its magical power. He saw the heavenly talisman in his hand break into thousands of starlight spots like broken glass, and then a whirlpool of immortal spirit energy rolled up, and then it dispersed and disappeared without a trace. There was no familiar non-phase peak, nor the familiar Blue River region. Even without the space conversion, this Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman was just wasted. Wang Lu was very surprised. He quickly took out another heavenly talisman, but he didn't use it. Instead, he sank his primordial spirit into the talisman paper to sense the coordinates of the non-phase peak, recorded in the talisman paper. After a while he got nothing. Thus, the reason for the failure of the heavenly talisman was found. The Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman couldn't find the location of the non-phase peak, so naturally, it couldn't convert the space and send Wang Lu back. But why couldn't it find the non-phase peak? As long as it was within the scope of 9 regions, unless a true immortal came down to Earth, even the sect leaders of the major sects would find it difficult to interfere with the coordinate locking of the Heavenly Talisman. In particular, in the past 2 years, the Heavenly Sword Hall upgraded the Heavenly Talisman, which encrypted the coordinate recording function, which completely eliminated the interference with the operation of the Heavenly Talisman that Wang Lu encountered in the battle against the Beast Master School on the Grand Cloud Mountain. So, who was stopping him from returning to Spirit Sword Mountain? Was it because of the previous Black Mist interference? Or was there someone behind the scenes, such as the Demon King, who should have been buried together with the old demon world 2,000 years ago? For a time, the questions in Wang Lu's mind were almost mixed up. The questions came out one after another, but he couldn't find a clue to solve them. What was worse was that he couldn't even determine the current situation. Although the surroundings seemed to be full of birds and fragrant flowers, to be able to make the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman completely unable to sense the non-phase peak, this was comparable to the treatment of the demon world. Wang Lu searched for what he had learned, but still couldn't find a reasonable explanation. Could it be that he was really swept away by the turbulent space to the other 3,000 great worlds? If that was the case, while he was thinking, suddenly there was a sound of footsteps in the distance. The so-called distance was really far away. Even with Wang Lu's hearing, it was still a bit blurry. The distance between them was at least 5 kilometers. However, the voices of those people were clearly distinguishable. "Eldest brother, do we still have to go deeper? Why don't we take a rest here first?" Luli, the experiential learning organized by the sect, is not for us to come to the Savage Land for an outing. If we don't go deep into danger, how can we make progress? The only hope for the sect to rise in the next 100 years is us. As a member of the Golden Generation, you must not fall behind. Chapter 479. Wang Lu felt that his worldview was in danger of collapsing. Since his debut, Wang Lu could be considered to have seen a lot of things. Although his cultivation base had just reached the King Pill stage, his vision had already surpassed many Yuanying stage and even deity stage cultivators. The Golden King of the Western continent was a powerhouse who had surpassed the level of Holy One and embarked on the road to godhood. Wang Lu talked and laughed wittily with him. The gatekeeper of the group of immortal tombs, the ancient sword demon, who opened the road to immortality for the cultivators of a region, and Wang Lu had a battle of wits and courage with him. Then there was the trip to the demon world, where he single-handedly resolved the crisis of the Black Tide. The legend of Wang Lu's experience had far surpassed that of the vast majority of cultivators in 9 regions. However, perhaps the world was really full of strange things. The sages once said that in the world, there would always be people and things that would make your worldview collapse. And now Wang Lu finally deeply realized this truth. Listening to the conversation of the group of cultivators from 100 miles away, he suddenly felt that his imagination seemed to be a bit insufficient. Luli? Golden Generation? The Savage Land? If it was just one of them, it might be a coincidence, but when the three of them were linked together, no matter how he thought about it, there was only one result. The management training program of Lingjian School. Things started from 200 years ago. At that time, Lingjian School was in its darkest and lowest period since its establishment. During this period, it was even repeatedly proposed by the members of the Wanxian League to downgrade its grade and expel it from the 5 uniques. The several assemblies and votes were also based on the astonishing achievements of Lingjian School during the Second Great War of Immortals and Demons 2,000 years ago. However, the number of votes for the proposal was getting closer and closer. However, as the saying goes, when things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. Since then, Lingjian School seemed to be blessed by the heaven and had one fortuitous encounter after another. First, several of the great elders broke through the bottleneck of their cultivation base and became the influential giants in the immortal cultivation world. The power of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League was completely stabilized. At the same time, the younger generation was full of talents, and some of them were even praised by the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall as having unprecedented aptitude. They were known as the Golden Generation of Lingjian School, and the sect had high hopes for them. Whether or not Lingjian School could rise from the weakest of the 5 uniques, the key lay in the development of the Golden Generation. After all, the potential of the elders was limited, and they did not have much lifespan left. Whether the Lingjian School could advance further still depended on the performance of the young people. In order to let the Golden Generation display their talents, the elders of the Lingjian School could be said to have painstaking efforts. They poured all their efforts into this group of cultivators, sparing no expense to let them grow as soon as possible. After all, before this, the Lingjian School had been suppressed for too long. However, this eagerness finally went to the extreme and produced a counterproductive effect. 150 years ago, the lead disciple of the sect at that time achieved great success in the King Pill, and several of his junior brothers and sisters had also reached peak Shudan stage, only one step away from the King Pill. Moreover, their real strength was far better than the ordinary King Pill. At this time, the elders of the sect very radically proposed a management trainee program, hoping to stimulate the further growth of these disciples. The so-called management trainee program was to send the Golden Generation to the Savage Land, expand the territory in that uncivilized land, and establish the power of the Lingjian School. Each of the disciples would assume sole responsibility in this process and become the ruler who controlled the land. This was also the first part of the ambitious grand strategy of the elders of Spirit Sword sect at that time. At that time, the Lingjian School was sparsely populated, and its resources were poor. The school's wealth accumulation and sphere of influence were even inferior to some middle-rank sections. However, this problem could not be solved by relying on a few talented disciples to advance by leaps and bounds in the path of immortal cultivation. After all, no matter how high an individual's cultivation base was, it was only an individual matter and could not benefit the sect. Therefore, at that time, the elders of Spirit Sword sect formulated a 100-year strategy, the first part of which was the management trainee program. The elders planned to use 20 years to let the Golden Generation become the sole ruler, and then transfer most of them back from the Savage Land to the 9 regions. After that, the Lingjian School would be backed by the developed Savage Land, which could absorb its rich resources. In front of them, under the guidance of the elders, a group of elite disciples would expand the territory for the sect. After 100 years, the Lingjian School would completely control the Blue River region and have its own forces in the 9 regions. If everything went well, they could even compete with Shangjing sect. Even if it didn't go well, at least they could get rid of the current predicament. The elders of Spirit Sword sect had poured all their efforts into this 100-year strategy, which contained their inner depression of witnessing the decline of Spirit Sword sect for many years, as well as their yearning for the rise of Spirit Sword sect. However, at this time they had to sigh with emotion that their strategy was too radical. Putting the hope of a 5 unique sect on a group of young people with at most 50 to 60 years of cultivation was simply like pulling a seedling to help it grow. Even if the golden generation at that time repeatedly created miracles and constantly refreshed people's expectations of them, it didn't mean that they were omnipotent. In fact, a large part of them had already overdrawn their potential. There was a limit to one's strength. When a sect overdrafted its disciples, the magnificent edifice would collapse with a loud bang. Wang Lu still didn't understand the specific process, but he at least knew that the golden generation of the Lingjian school was nearly wiped out in the management trainee program. Hundreds of talented disciples fell, and among the cultivators of the same generation, there were only 10 Heavenly Sword Hall elders left. One of them had been living in seclusion and had never shown up until now. What was even more tragic was that, although his masters had never mentioned it, there was a very obvious phenomenon. Other sects, from Shangjing sect to some low-rank sects, all had their own elders. Only Lingjian school didn't. Fengyin Taoist master, who had only cultivated for more than 200 years, was the most senior person in the sect. In other words, the fall of the golden generation was accompanied by the elders of Spirit Sword sect. More than 100 years ago, it was still a mystery what kind of tragic disaster the Spirit Sword sect encountered during their pioneering operation in the Savage Land. Over the years, whether it was from the inside of the sect or with the help of the external forces of the Wanxian League, Wang Lu had found nothing. Later on, he lost interest in continuing to explore. After all, it was a tragedy that the elders of the sect did not want to mention, so why would he bother to open that scar? Unexpectedly, now that he had given up exploring the secret, he appeared in front of him. The group of young cultivators who were walking hundreds of miles away sounded like the golden generation of the Lingjian school. In other words, the failure of the transfer of Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman actually sent him to more than 100 years ago. Did he complete the time travel? No. This was a big deal, so he had to seriously confirm it. After all, the more absurd the speculation, the more cautious it was. Thereupon, Wang Lu closed his breath and concentrated his mind. He then used his hearing ability to carefully listen to the conversation 5 miles away. In short, Luli, since you've come to the Savage Land, you must forge ahead and not waste your talent. Big brother, you're overflowing with talent and omnipotent, but I'm just a mortal. Ha ha ha, junior brother Luli, you're naughty again. We're both members of the first echelon of this generation, so there's no qualitative difference in the aptitude and perception between us. How could there be a genius and a mortal? What you lack are nothing more than 2 things. First, focus. You have too many distractions. You have to learn talismans, you have to learn array formations, you have to learn blacksmithing, you have to learn everything that the elders of the sect can teach you. Even if your perception is amazing, if you're distracted, your cultivation speed naturally can't catch up with mine. Second, you don't have enough confidence. Because you have too many distractions, your cultivation speed is lacking compared to other junior brothers and sisters. You feel ashamed of your inferiority, so you even give up treatment and begin to be more obsessed with the cultivation of miscellaneous things, in order to find the balance. But the more you do this, the slower your cultivation on the right path is until today. Damn, big brother, please spare me? I'm just being polite to you. But you actually talk incessantly and even expose my sore spot. Is there a senior brother like you? Hey, do you mind? It should be okay, your crushed junior sister Muing is in the other team so she can't hear these words. Damn, Luli, you actually have a crush on Muing. Big news. Big brother. You can't even tell me about your crush? But that day, I saw you and Niyun singing loudly after getting drunk. You said everything, so I thought you didn't care about it anymore. Hey Luli, you actually drank and sang with senior sister Yun? Big brother. Okay, I won't say anything. Don't be angry, I just want to encourage you. It's rare for us to be in the same team, and for the next 10 years we will be together day and night. We will overcome the thorns and thorns together in this barren land, so you must be motivated. Big brother, don't worry, I am very motivated now, and I can't wait to reach the nascent soul realm. Oh, your Shudon foundation is still not stable. Although it is good to be motivated, why are you so anxious to reach the nascent soul realm? Because only when I reach the nascent soul realm can I beat you, King Pill bitch. Junior brother, you are being naughty again. With how many distractions you have, even if you reach the nascent soul realm, you still can't beat me. I am going to kill you now. Yes, you are right, they should be people from Lingjian school. 5 miles away, Wang Lu gently nodded, confirming his guess. Although he didn't know the other 7 people in this group of 8 except for Lu Li, this style of conversation should be unique to Lingjian school. Moreover, the elder Lu Li that Wang Lu was familiar with was an expert at the peak of the nascent soul realm, but at this time, elder Lu Li was only at the Shudan realm. If it wasn't for the old man's recent excessive indulgence, which caused his cultivation to drop sharply, it could only be attributed to time traveling back to the past. The result is really time traveling, and it is more than 100 years at once. But it is a pity that I didn't get the bonus plug-in for time traveling. Wang Lu sighed and then prepared to get up and leave. Martial Uncle Lu Li and the others were moving very fast, and their goal was in the direction where he was standing. But Wang Lu didn't intend to meet them so early. This time traveling was too bizarre, and the principle was completely unexplainable. Wang Lu didn't intend to make any mistakes because of the disordered time and space. In the stories of time traveling that he knew, there was no lack of time travelers who came into contact with their predecessors, and the predecessors suddenly disappeared. As a result, history was greatly changed, and red demons wreaked havoc in the world. If this caused Elder Lu Li to disappear because of this reason, he would be guilty. However, just as Wang Lu stood up, he suddenly heard a curious voice in his ears. "Excuse me, what did you mean by time traveling just now?" Turning around, he saw a handsome young cultivator wearing a red and white robe that was 70 to 80% similar to his, standing there with a curious look on his face. Wang Lu was startled because he had just heard this voice. It was the current chief disciple of Lingjian school, who was supposed to be 5 miles away. This encounter really came a little too fast. Chapter 480. This sudden encounter made Wang Lu very surprised. The previous moment the other party was still 5 miles away, and the next moment he was already in front of him. Moreover, he didn't even notice it. This kind of method was indeed a bit fierce. Although Wang Lu had never been known for his keen perception, and at this time he had just experienced a time and space transformation, so his consciousness was somewhat fuzzy, but as the lead disciple of Lingjian school, even if it was his shortcoming in immortal cultivation, it was still above average. However, the other party was actually able to completely hide from his perception and approach him. The strength of this golden generation big brother could not help but secretly surprise Wang Lu. From the faint magical power fluctuation that the other party emitted, his cultivation base was similar to his own. Both of them were low-rank King Pill, and his magical power was extremely vigorous, 10 times better than the ordinary King Pill, which was also similar to his own. Although Wang Lu couldn't see through his cultivation method for a moment, he expected that it would not be an ordinary one. At the same time, his temperament was as sharp as a sword, but it did not appear to be threatening, showing that his attainment in the way of the sword had reached the realm of following his heart's desire. The sharpness of the way of the sword could be freely controlled, and this was a realm that many Yuanying stage sword cultivators had not mastered. Sure enough, he was indeed worthy to be the big brother of the golden generation of Lingjian school. At least, he was not under Shangjing sect's Chonghua Ferry. While Wang Lu was carefully looking at the other party was also looking at him. After just a few glances, he was full of surprise. "Who exactly are you, Your Excellency? Your dress seems to have a lot of relationship with my Lingjian school. Although your cultivation method is strange, it faintly has the characteristics of my Lingjian school. You should clearly be a disciple of Spirit Sword sect. But I've never seen you in the dozens of years of immortal cultivation." After finishing his words, Wang Lu was also surprised. His clothes were similar to the man's. Lingjian school didn't pay much attention to the school's uniform for more than 100 years. The basic framework of the true disciple's uniform had never changed. The difference between his clothes and the man's was only a little bit. The key was, how did he know that the martial arts he practiced had a lot to do with Lingjian school? Although he did cultivate in Spirit Sword Mountain for decades, and most of the content he learned was taught by the elders of Spirit Sword sect, the main body of the method system was Primal Chaos Heaven Splitting Sword Chi, which was inherited from the ancient sword demon and had nothing to do with the Lingjian school. Although the other non-phase method was an authentic spirit sword method, it was created by his master Wang Wu, which also had little to do with the Lingjian school's heritage. As for the other miscellaneous arts such as the Tao of formations and talismans, he had not dabbled in them yet, so they would not affect the main body of his cultivation technique. Judging from the fluctuation of magical power alone, he had almost no connection with Lingjian school. But how could he determine that he was a disciple of Spirit Sword sect? While Wang Lu was still in a state of amazement, that big brother continued to infer, in theory, you are a disciple of Spirit Sword sect, but the main body of your cultivation method is not passed down by Spirit Sword sect. Your age should be younger than me by a few years, but the realm of your Fali is not below mine. This kind of amazing talent should not be unknown. And with this kind of aptitude, you should have learned the sect's supreme stellar sword mantra. But now it seems, I say, could it be that you are the illegitimate child of the sect leader? The big brother suspiciously looked at Wang Lu, and after a long time, he suddenly patted his head. Sorry, I'm talking to myself again. This is an old problem. Please don't remember it. Before I forgot to introduce myself. I am the lead disciple of Lingjian school Ouyang Shang. May I know your honorable name? Surname Wang, given name Lu. I'm that. Speaking of his origin, Wang Lu suddenly felt that it was a bit difficult to explain. However, before Wang Lu could finish his words, Ouyang Shang laughed and patted him on the shoulder. It's okay. Your identity is particularly sensitive, so it's okay if it's inconvenient to say it. As long as we have a tacit understanding, it's fine. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that sect leader, that serious old guy, actually knows how to live a good life. Wang Lu thought for a moment and felt that based on the current situation, acting as the illegitimate child of the sect leader seemed to be not bad. Although there were certainly many things that couldn't be explained, with the temperament of this big brother of Spirit Sword sect, the next development would certainly be like this. Ha ha ha, let me introduce to everyone. This is the illegitimate child of our sect leader, junior brother Wang Lu. This time he came to participate in the management trainee program with us. His identity is particularly sensitive, so I hope that everyone can take care of him. Don't ask about things that shouldn't be asked. Since we are all from Spirit Sword sect, we must live in harmony and make contributions together in this savage land. Then the other people could only hold back their curiosity and force themselves to live in harmony with him and make contributions together. In this way, although there would be a lot of awkwardness, it would reduce a lot of trouble. For example, why would there suddenly be one more person in the management trainee program of Lingjian school? In the Savage Land, which was regarded as the back garden of Lingjian school, why would there be an unfamiliar king pill? Now, it could be explained with the reason of the illegitimate child of the sect leader. Although they didn't know whether this big brother Ouyang Shang came up with this explanation intentionally or unintentionally, but since it was useful, then let's just use it. A moment later, the other 7 people arrived on their flying swords. In the team, the young Luli was among them. Different from the later 6th elder, who had a distinct black and white beard at this time, Luli still looked extremely inexperienced. His miscellaneous knowledge had not yet been thoroughly mastered, which could be seen from his clothes. On his black and white robe, there were all kinds of ornaments hanging endlessly. In addition to the 3 mustard seed bags on his waist, there was also a dirty abacus, 2 withered oranges, and a small totem composed of feathers and animal bones. It could be seen that at this time, Luli had learned a lot of miscellaneous knowledge, which made people unable to restrain themselves from laughing. The leader of the team was a girl in a red and white dress. She had a gorgeous appearance and a generous temperament. While still in midair, she frowned and loudly complained, "Big brother, don't be so elusive. Uncle sect leader didn't teach you the earth shrinking technique to scare people. Hey, who is this? Why does he look like you?" The several people behind the girl also showed a puzzled expression. The big brother Ouyang Shang laughed out loud and clearly. Ha ha ha. Let me introduce him to everyone. This is the illegitimate child of our sect leader, junior brother Wang Lu. This time he came to participate in the management trainee program with us. His identity is particularly sensitive, so I hope everyone can take care of him. Don't ask about things that shouldn't be asked. Since we are all from Spirit Sword sect, we must live in harmony and make contributions together in this savage land. Then, the 7 junior brothers and sisters showed a twisted expression as if they were constipated. The gorgeous girl couldn't help but take half a step forward and asked, "Big brother, this person is obviously..." Before she could finish, a hand appeared on the girl's head, rubbing her slightly fluffy curly hair. Ouyangshang, with a generous elder's attitude, softly said, "Kaixia, be good. Don't make things difficult for others." The cheeks of the girl named Kaixia immediately turned red. There was a bit of shyness but also a bit of anger. Being touched by her big brother Ouyangshang. No matter how angry she was, she couldn't vent it. Finally, she angrily stomped her foot and then turned around to go back. Ouyangshang's smile was also a bit twisted. Just now Kaixia stomped her foot. This junior sister who cultivated Fiery Sword had always been straightforward and fiery. Moreover, her attack power was really amazing. His foot most likely needed to be nurtured. In short, we now have a strong support. Although junior brother Wang Lu is young, his strength is outstanding, and he has already achieved King Pill. With such a strong support, I believe that our next wasteland reclamation operation will be smoother. Therefore, I decided to make a little modification to the plan. Instead of camping in Western Mountain Jade Forest, we will go to Blessed Fountain. As a result, the junior brothers and sisters didn't have the time to be curious that this young man named Wang Lu was actually the Taoist master of King Pill before they were stunned by Ouyangshang's words. A tall male cultivator widened his eyes and asked, "Wait a minute, instead of camping in Jade Forest, we will go to Blessed Fountain? Big brother, can't you be a bit more reliable? Camping in Jade Forest is already very risky. Going to Blessed Fountain is just courting death. It is said that there is a gathering place of the 1,000-year-old flood dragon over there." Ouyangshang said with a smile, "It's just a 1,000-year-old flood dragon. What's so great about it? F***ck, if you think it's nothing, then why don't you fight one-on-one for us to see? You've just achieved King Pill and you're already so arrogant. When you reach Yuanying stage, you will definitely go and provoke the heavenly tribulation to seek ascension." Junior sister Kaixia, don't be so irritable. I know that the strength of the 1,000-year-old flood dragon is comparable to that of a Yuanying stage-old monster. With our team alone we can barely resist it. Considering that there are still shrimp soldiers and crab generals under the flood dragon's command, we will undoubtedly lose. However, that's only considering the 8 of us. Now that we have junior brother Wang Lu, our chance of winning is more than 70%. Considering that we are all the sect's elites, it is likely that some of us will have a breakthrough in the battle. Counting this part, our chance of winning is more than 90%. If we don't dare to bet even if we have 90% chance of winning, then we don't need to come to the Savage Land to explore the land, we can just directly go into seclusion in the sect. Hey, how can you be so wishful thinking? With just one more person, you've already changed from certain defeat to 90% chance of winning. Do you think junior brother Wang Lu is an elder of Spirit Sword sect? Junior sister Kaixia, you have to believe in the power of academia. My conclusion is strictly and accurately calculated. If you think it's wrong, you're welcome to check it. With that, Ouyangshang stretched out his hand and summoned more than 100 calculation talismans, and then sent them to Kaixia. When the girl saw them, she immediately felt dizzy. She hastily waved her hand and said, "Forget it, you're the big brother, whatever you say is right. Okay?" While Ouyangshang and Kaixia were quarreling, Wang Lu was lost in thought. There were too many mysteries in time travel. For example, right now, Wang Lu was very curious about one thing. If before they met him, Ouyangshang and the others were planning to camp in a place called Jade Forest, then now it seemed that they had changed their destination to Blessed Fountain. Then history was likely to have changed. If history could be changed, then could the tragedy of the golden generation of Lingjian School be avoided? If that could be done, then would there still be him, the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect? Chapter 481. All kinds of conjectures about time and space were not uncommon in 9 regions. From the supreme cultivators whose cultivation base was close to ascending to immortality to the tea-house storytellers who loved imagination, they all had their own conjectures about time and space. Of course, it was just a conjecture, because even the most brilliant cultivator could not manipulate time on a large scale. A cup of immortal tea was the legend and myth of cultivators, but there had never been a real example of time and space travel. According to Wang Lu's understanding, there were currently several popular conjectures. One of them was that history could not be changed. Even if someone could go back to the past by some means, they would find that they could not change anything that had happened, because their time and space travel itself was already doomed by history. Another one was the parallel space theory. People could indeed change history by going back to the past, but from the moment they went back, the history had branched off, and they could only change one of the branches. Relatively speaking, Wang Lu preferred the second hypothesis, because at least the second hypothesis made people have the possibility to exert their subjective initiative. For example, in this case, if Wang Lu's efforts could change the tragic experience of Lingjian School, then he would certainly go all out. As for the other branches that had not been changed, in any case it had nothing to do with him, so he didn't need to care about it. Moreover, if his time and space travel was already doomed by history, then there was no reason for him to cultivate in Spirit Sword Mountain for 20 years, but no elder had ever mentioned it to him. Not to mention that he still clearly remembered that in the Immortal Gathering, he almost had no chance to enter the mountain because of the blurred vision of the sect leader. If they really remembered him, how could they make such a mistake? Therefore, from now on he had to correct his mentality. Everything that he did in the Savage Land was to reverse history. If he did it well enough, the golden generation of Lingjian School might not die. Regarding the golden generation, Wang Lu actually had no feelings for them. After all, most of the elders who taught him his skills were unknown in the golden generation at that time. In other words, if the golden generation did not die, would Feng Yin still be the head of the Lingjian School? Would the position of Elder of Heavenly Sword Hall still belong to Fang He, Lu Xian, and the others? Especially Wang Wu. Would she still be the Wang Wu of today? However, Wang Lu did not intend to be indifferent to what had happened in the past just because of these things. In Spirit Sword Mountain, after getting along with the elders for decades, Wang Lu could clearly feel that the pain of that year was a shadow that they could not forget for a lifetime. If they could change the past, they would definitely choose to change it even if they had to sacrifice everything now. Wang Lu had received a lot of kindness from the elders of Spirit Sword Mountain, so at this time, it was time to repay them. Half a day later, the group of 9 people passed through a jadeite forest and advanced along the steep mountain path until a clear spring appeared in the distance. Well, we finally see Blessed Fountain, but we have consumed a lot of energy along the way. Let's camp here and go to Blessed Fountain tomorrow. The big brother of Spirit Sword Sect, Ouyang Shang, thought for a moment and then made a decision. Then there was a burst of cheers from the back of the team. Several young cultivators directly lay down on the ground and didn't want to move even half a step. Ouyang Shang shrugged slightly and shook his head. Obviously, he was slightly dissatisfied with the laziness of his junior brothers and sisters. Then he turned his head and whispered to the young man beside him, who was also wearing a red and white robe and whose appearance was somewhat similar to him. I've let you see a joke. These junior brothers and sisters are really not up to standard. It's you who is too demanding. Wang Lu lightly responded. Along the way, it was not a smooth journey. At this time, there was no black tide that Wang Lu later saw in the savage land of the Western Mountain, but the indigenous creatures of the savage land were still an important threat that could not be ignored. In the jadeite forest, the group of people was attacked by monsters. A group of no less than 100 mountain spirits and tree monsters that had cultivated inner cores surrounded them. Their attacks were like a tide, and their leader was a ferocious human-faced owl. Its strength was comparable to that of an ordinary peak-stage gold core cultivator. Although there were 2 Taoist Master King Pill in the team of Spirit Sword Sect, after fighting all the way, everyone's consumption was not small. However, in Wang Lu's view, it was already incredible that this group of people could successfully break through the encirclement without any casualties. The team led by Ouyang Shang was not even the strongest elite of the Golden Generation. The strength of the 8 disciples was uneven, and they were evenly selected from more than 100 disciples to form a team. Their comprehensive strength was similar to that of other teams, and they didn't have the strength to go against the heaven. However, in the jadeite forest, the human-faced owl beast and its minions had the terrifying strength bonus. However, under the leadership of Ouyang Shang, the group of people was more daunting than dangerous. During this period, although Wang Lu had made a lot of contributions, he didn't show his full ability. The success of breaking through the encirclement mainly depended on the strength of this team of cultivators. And this strength was really considerable. Although it was not to the point of going against the heaven, this team of cultivators was the top elite in any sect. And at that time, there were actually more than 10 such teams in Lingjian school. However, Ouyang Shang was still not satisfied. Compared with the cultivators of the same generation, our group of cultivators is indeed very strong, but it's still far from enough to make up for the decline of Lingjian school in the past thousands of years. Compared with the other sects of the 5 uniques, the foundation of Lingjian school is too poor. It's at an absolute disadvantage in any aspect, and there's not much time left for us to catch up. Oh, not much. Do you need to be in such a hurry? There's no other way, there's no hurry. The gap between Lingjian school and the other sects is widened little by dozens of generations of cultivators over thousands of years, and the time that Lingjian school can use to catch up is none other than our golden generation. I don't know how much luck Lingjian school has to be able to gather so many talented and loyal disciples in this generation. When our generation passes away, I'm afraid it's impossible for us to have the same luck again. And to catch up with the gap of thousands of years in one generation, that's easier said than done. Wang Lu asked with a smile, is it necessary to be so obsessed with catching up with the gap? To be able to stabilize the position of one of the 5 uniques is already good enough. The one who takes the top gets the middle, and the one who takes the middle gets the bottom. The reason why Lingjian school has declined from its heyday until now is because it doesn't want to make progress. The biggest reason is that it doesn't want to make progress. Ouyang Shang shook his head and said, right now in the Wanxian League, Shangjing school is the dominant sect, which has an absolute and unshakable lead over the other sections. However, whether it's the Royal Soldier sect or the 10,000 Arts sect, they have never given up on catching up with Shangjing school, and Shangjing school has never lost its sense of crisis. But they are still like this. How could our Lingjian school, which has fallen behind, just let it go? Only by redoubling our efforts and bearing a heavier burden than any other sect could we possibly catch up step by step. The ancients said that everyone is born with talent, so for Lingjian school to suddenly produce a golden generation, presumably, there must be a historical mission that we need to undertake. After saying that, Ouyang Shang smiled. I'm sorry, I started talking to myself again. Alas, since I was a child, I have this problem. As long as I open my mouth, I can't stop. Sometimes I would accidentally say something that I shouldn't say. However, please believe that I treat people with sincerity, and I would never intentionally make things difficult for others. Alas, unfortunately, there are very few people in this world who understand me. Not to mention outside, even in the mountain, I was often scolded by my master and uncles. The most hateful thing is that there are a few incompetent junior brothers and sisters who suggested me to wear a chew, which is simply outrageous. How could a mere chew stop your mouth? Ouyang Shang gawked for a moment, and then nodded. That's reasonable. How can we rely on external force to change our own problem? On this point, I never thought about it. Junior brother Wang Lu is indeed a genius cultivator who could achieve the king pill at such a young age. There are many things that I can learn from you. Hearing this, Wang Lu completely realized that this guy's mouth was hopeless, so he was too lazy to continue talking. He directly blocked his hearing and no longer paid attention to Ouyang Shang, who was talking non-stop. Although this was a bit cruel to Ouyang Shang, who was in the mood to talk, but Wang Lu really didn't have the mood to strike up a conversation with him. At the same time, Wang Lu was also deeply moved. Although this senior brother Ouyang's mouth was a bit messy, and his brain was a bit off, but when it came to major issues, he was actually very clear-headed and rational. His thinking was actually not wrong at all. With Lingjian school's current situation, if they wanted to truly stabilize the structure of the 5 uniques, or even advance further in the cultivation world, they could only put in more effort than the other sections. The golden generation was a heaven-sent opportunity, and also the only opportunity. If it was replaced by anyone, they would not let it go. Moreover, along the way, Wang Lu could see that Ouyangshang was not all brawn and no brains. Although he had an almost pathological obsession with becoming stronger, in the specific process of implementation, Ouyangshang had actually always controlled the risk within a cautious range. For example, this temporary change of route to Blessed Fountain was made after taking into account that Wang Lu's addition would enhance the team's strength. And the fierce battle in Jadeite Forest had also completely proved that his calculation was accurate. The group of people just happened to reduce the risk of the battle to a level where there was no surprise and no danger. Such a person was indeed worthy of the name of the sect's senior brother. In a sense, he was even more competent than him. Compared to Ouyangshang, Wang Lu's personal style was too distinct, and he was not approachable enough. Then the next question was, since there was no problem with Ouyangshang, what was the tragedy that eventually led to the destruction of the Golden Generation? While he was thinking about it, he suddenly heard Ouyangshang change the subject. He no longer talked about the impact of the backward construction of the public cafeteria of Spirit Sword Mountain on the cultivation base of the sect's disciples. Instead, he proposed, "Junior brother Wang Lu, I think it's not too late, why don't we go fishing? Do you mean the rumor that a certain elder received 250 million gold spirit stones from Royal Soldier Sect to overthrow the rule of the sect leader, and then see which junior brother and junior sister are fooled? Whoever is fooled is a stupid fish." Junior brother Wang Lu, how did you come up with such a perverted game? But this time I mean it literally. Just the two of us fishing. With that, Ouyangshang pointed to the distance. In the distance, under the setting sun, the blessed fountain was glittering with thousands of golden scales. Ouyangshang actually wanted to team up with Wang Lu and go to Blessed Fountain in advance. I finally understand how the Golden Generation died. Chapter 482. For Ouyangshang's proposal to go fishing at Blessed Fountain, Wang Lu didn't hesitate to agree. First, Wang Lu really wanted to know the real purpose of Ouyangshang. He asked him to form a team to go to Blessed Fountain ahead of time. Was it really for fishing? Second, Wang Lu didn't put a mere Blessed Fountain in his eyes. Although Blessed Fountain was still a dangerous place full of thorns for the Golden Generation of Spirit Sword Sect, for a person who had created one miracle after another in his more than 20 years of debut, the 1,000-year-old flood dragon residing in Blessed Fountain was actually not enough. Even if Wang Lu couldn't win, he still had enough strength to safely retreat. And Ouyangshang was also a straightforward person. When Wang Lu agreed, he explained it to Kaixia. "We'll go out for a walk first. You guys stay here and don't run around. If you encounter something, remember to inform me in time." Then he pulled Wang Lu and disappeared without a trace, leaving the stunned Kaixia standing in the same place. She didn't even have the time to step on Ouyangshang's foot. The two of them flew together from the cliff of the mountain all the way to the bank of Blessed Fountain. Although the journey was not far along the way, the two of them could perceive that there were a lot of hidden dangers nearby. It's indeed worthy to be called the Savage Land. It can always give people stimulation and uplift their spirits. After waving his sword to drive away an overly curious strange bird, Ouyangshang had already stepped on the cobblestone on the side of Blessed Fountain, and Wang Lu was right behind him. After landing, he went straight to the point. "If there's anything you want to say, can you say it now? It's really possible." Ouyangshang showed a pleasantly surprised expression. Obviously, in his decades of life, there were very few people who said to him, "Just say what you want to say," such generous words. Only the useful parts. That's a lot. Ouyangshang's interest was not diminished. Obviously, for him, the concept of useful was too broad. Perhaps discussing whether to eat savory tofu pudding or sweet tofu pudding tonight was enough to be an important topic. Very well, let me be clear. It's limited to the top two specific matters related to our fishing operation. Each matter must not exceed 1,000 words. Ouyangshang was shocked. At that moment, his gaze on Wang Lu became sharp, as if he was looking at his natural enemy. This fellow actually used a single sentence to seal off his joy of speaking freely. The bloodline of the sect leader truly lived up to its name. However, since that was the case, then he would just have to do official business. This time we are indeed here to fish. There is a 1,000-year-old flood dragon in the blessed fountain. It is the biggest obstacle to our base here, and I plan to use the next month to gather everyone's strength to expel or subdue it. I believe you can also calculate that for the current us, this goal is very difficult. Wang Lu said, according to the popular formula of Royal Soldier Sect, the possibility of us reaching the goal without any loss is less than 1%. There is an 80% chance that both sides will suffer. Among the 9 of us, at least 2 or 3 people will fall. Oh, you have the internal combat deduction formula of Royal Soldier Sect? If it's convenient, I'd like to learn from you. But back to the topic at hand. It was rare for Ouyangshang to take the initiative to return to the topic at hand. It could be seen that he was bound to waste a lot of words on the next topic. The difficulty of the goal is relative to the present. But in the next month, I will make the strength of the team go up a big step so that we have a 70% chance of defeating the opponent. At that time, I will really start the decisive battle. If we want to complete this evolution in 1 month, there is only one way to go: actual combat. The target of the actual combat is the 1,000-year-old flood dragon in the blessed fountain, as well as its shrimp soldiers and crab generals. I believe that with the talent of the junior brothers and sisters, every time they fight, they will have a great harvest. Coupled with their decades of cultivation base in the mountain, their progress will be very rapid. But from another point of view, the first battle will be very dangerous, especially for the junior brothers and sisters with the lowest cultivation base, as well as those with higher cultivation base than them, but especially like to sacrifice themselves to save others. Caught off guard, it is likely that there will be heavy casualties. Before he could finish, Wang Lu interrupted him. So you asked me to scout ahead of time? Yes, at least we have to find out the actual situation of the flood dragon. The current intelligence is completely based on the notes left by the elder who came to the savage land to pick herbs by chance, so the error may be quite astonishing. The information about the 1,000-year-old flood dragon was updated 30 years ago, so it is not unusual for there to be any changes in the past 30 years. I don't want to bring the junior brothers and sisters tomorrow to explore the savage land, only to find that the situation is completely out of control and dangerous. Wang Lu asked with interest, "You are worried that the junior brothers and sisters will be in danger, but aren't you afraid that something will happen to you if you go fishing first?" Of course not, I am the big brother of the Lingjian school, how can I fall here? Ouyangshang was very generous, and if even I am afraid, what about the junior brothers and sisters? How can the management trainee program of the Lingjian school be carried out? So I must not be afraid, and I will not be afraid. My courage will support me to keep moving forward. Hearing this, Wang Lu could not help but sigh in his heart. It was really a pity that this guy died that year. If he could survive. If Heavenly Sword Hall could have such an elder. Unfortunately, all of these were just if, because Wang Lu already knew the end of Ouyangshang. He felt that it was a pity that Ouyangshang was in high spirits at this time. Unfortunately, he still didn't know why Ouyangshang died. And he didn't know where the catastrophe that even the elders of Spirit Sword Sect could not escape came from. Otherwise, he would go to the Spirit Sword Mountain to report to the elders, even if it meant exposing his identity as a time traveler. He must stop all of this from happening. But now, even if he went to the Spirit Sword Mountain, there was nothing he could do. He had no way to prove that he was a time traveler. The phenomenon of Lingjian school being separated from the previous generation was too serious, and he knew very little about the previous generation of elders, so there was no way he could prove that he was a time traveler. And even if he could prove that he was inextricably linked with the Lingjian school, it was still a fantasy to want the Lingjian school to cancel the management trainee program. After all, at this time he was just a time traveler, and the big brother and lead disciple who could influence the decision of the sect was Ouyangshang. Because of this, Wang Lu followed Ouyangshang closely, ready to act according to the situation. Although in theory, his strength as Taoist Master King Pill might not be enough to go against the heaven, after so many years of cultivation, he had done too many things that couldn't be calculated by theory. Very well. Then let me see what kind of ability this Blessed Fountain's flood dragon has. With that, Wang Lu took the lead and stepped into the Blessed Fountain one step ahead of Ouyangshang. The moment his feet fell into the water, the creature in the depths of the fountain was suddenly awakened. Roar! With a roar that shook the water surface, a water column soared into the sky. Wang Lu propped up his non-phase sword defense and firmly stood firm under the impact of the water column, stepping on the burst of water under his feet. His posture was indescribably cool and calm. However, the complexion of Ouyang Shang, who was next to the water, suddenly changed. Junior brother Wang Lu, be careful. Because after the water column reached the highest point, it turned into rain all over the sky. The rain pattered on the vegetation on the shore, but it brought forth a pungent smoke. The plants that were splashed by the water droplets withered and turned yellow, and the beasts in the forest fell to the ground. Their fur curled up, blood dripped, and they died in pain. The water of the blessed fountain had unexpectedly turned into a highly toxic substance in an instant. The toxicity was far more violent than imagined. In the depths of the savage land near Blessed Fountain, the creatures that had lived here for a long time were no longer simple characters. However, under the corrosion of the poisonous water, they had no resistance. The residual power of the water column was already like this. Being in the center of the impact of the water column, the pressure that Wang Lu had to bear could be imagined. However, Wang Lu didn't care about this at all. After propping up his defense with his non-phase sword defense, he still had the strength to stab his primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi underwater. The sword chi was extremely soft and gentle. It quietly eroded down the water column, extending all the way until it touched a domain that should not be violated. The next moment, a huge sense of crisis surged in the hearts of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang at the same time. Let's go. On the water column, Wang Lu warned while controlling the sword of Mount Kuan to fly up, no longer provoking the flood dragon in the blessed fountain. Ouyang Shang was even more vigilant. Without waiting for Wang Lu to open his mouth, he had already escaped with the ground shrinking technique. The next moment, the sky above Blessed Fountain was covered with dark clouds. Only a flash of lightning could be heard, followed by a torrential downpour. The rain was like a curtain, as if the Milky Way was pouring down to the ground. The water level of the pool that was not full began to rise rapidly. The water swallowed everything on the shore and expanded into a wide lake. And in the depths of the lake, countless pairs of fierce eyes suddenly opened. Ha ha ha, the feeling of teasing a Yuanying stage-old monster is quite cool. At this time, 10 miles away, Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang had already entered the safe zone. Wang Lu descended from the sky with a satisfied smile. Ouyang Shang also had a smile on his face, but there was a hint of seriousness in his smile. This flood dragon of Blessed Fountain is stronger than expected. 30 years ago, when the sect's elders passed by, it could only rely on the momentum of the mountains and rivers. But now it can link up with the power of heaven. Moreover, the pool is not filled with shrimp soldiers and crab generals, but rather the descendants of the flood dragon. The number is small, but the comprehensive strength is much stronger. Ouyang Shang's eyesight was very sharp. When the water level of Blessed Fountain rose, he only took a glance and basically understood the outline of the flood dragon's strength. However, after seeing it clearly, he was instead shocked. It seems that the plan to choose the location of Blessed Fountain needs to be adjusted. Ouyang Shang nodded and then suddenly changed the topic. Speaking of which, junior brother Wang Lu, there is something that I have always wanted to ask, but now I have to say it. Who exactly are you? Ouyang Shang looked at Wang Lu. His eyes were burning but not sharp and threatening. Instead, they were full of sincerity, like a young girl yearning for love. Wang Lu smiled. Didn't you say that I am the illegitimate child of the sect leader? That's impossible. Ouyang Shang resolutely said. A mere illegitimate child of the sect leader. It is impossible to easily block the poisonous water array of the blessed fountain. That water contains the essence of the 1,000-year-old flood dragon, which is very corrosive. Even if I resist it, it would be a bit difficult. But not only did you block it, you also seem to be doing it with ease. Wang Lu shrugged his shoulders. About this, although I am embarrassed to say it, but your strength seems to be above me, Ouyang Shang said. But because of this, I am sure that you are not the illegitimate child of the sect leader. Oh, what is the relationship between these two things? Ouyang Shang said. Because I am the illegitimate child of the sect leader. F***CK. Chapter 483. Wang Lu found that since the spirit sword Heavenly Talisman failed to transfer time and space, which involved him in this time travel drama, his worldview had been repeatedly hit. It could make Wang Lu himself, the worldview destroyer, feel shaken, which showed how terrifying the script of this drama was. However, as one of the leading actors, Ouyang Shang seemed very calm. I am the illegitimate child of the sect leader, so I am very clear about how much resources the sect can invest, and how much effect I can achieve as an illegitimate child. I also know the potential limit of this bloodline. To put it bluntly, my strength basically means a limit, but you have surpassed this limit. Although the range is not too big, it is undoubtedly beyond doubt. Ouyang Shang said, of course, there are no absolutes in this world. Perhaps you had some fortuitous encounters on the path of cultivation. Perhaps you have some fortuitous encounter on the road of immortal cultivation, but since your talent and strength are above me, then there is no reason for the sect leader not to choose you as the big brother of the sect, which is also the future leader of the sect. Wang Lu said with a smile, perhaps he just doesn't like me. If you know him, you should know that he has never been a person who pays attention to personal feelings. He has long given everything to the sect. Even his former lover can be abandoned like a pair of worn-out shoes. He chose me not because I am his son, but because I am better than anyone else. Wang Lu smiled bitterly. He was indeed not familiar with the sect leader of this generation, because the sect leader he was familiar with was called Feng Yin, who in this era should still be a young man with shoot-on-stage cultivation base. In short, at first I really thought that you are the illegitimate child of the sect leader, because only that explanation seemed to be the most reasonable. But now it seems that I have guessed wrong, so I want to know, who exactly are you? Wang Lu thought about it and felt that with Ouyang Shang's temperament, the most appropriate answer should be, if I say that I am a time traveler, what would you think? Upon hearing this, Ouyang Shang was startled. After thinking for a moment, he smiled and said, welcome to 9 regions. Then his smile faded. May I ask, what are you doing here? His reaction was not bad. He was indeed the big brother of Spirit Sword sect. The thickness of his nerves had reached the standard. I'm here to save you, Wang Lu said frankly. Or rather, I'm here to save all of you. Ouyang Shang's eyes widened. Are you here to save all of us? This kind of speech reminds me of some cult teachings that are popular in some remote and backward places. You have a good eye. Before I transmigrated, I did hold the position of a cult leader. Even with Ouyang Shang's eloquence at this moment, he also felt somewhat speechless. Fortunately, Wang Lu didn't wait for him to continue. Even so, I wasn't joking when I said I'm here to save people. Wang Lu thought that since his identity as a transmigrator had been revealed, there was no need to hide the rest of the matter, so he summarized it concisely. I come from 150 years in the future, and I was the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect at that time. And according to the history I know, your group was almost wiped out in the Savage Land. Really? Ouyang Shang's tone was relatively flat. He didn't directly rebuke him, nor did he fall into fear. Wiped out. So, the reason you transmigrated this time is to save us? Although the cause and effect relationship is somewhat reversed at present, it's more or less the same. If that's the case, then I thank you on behalf of my junior brothers and sisters. Ouyang Shang nodded his head. But you don't have to say the next words. Wang Lu froze for a moment. I wanted to be polite, but since you said no, then forgive me for going straight to the point. Actually, I've wanted to say this for a long time. Your management training program is simply seeking death. I think it's better to withdraw it as soon as possible. Ouyang Shang also froze for a moment. When I said you don't have to say the next words, I was referring to this. Wang Lu froze again. This Uncle Ouyang, you don't have to call me uncle. You've transmigrated here, so we can talk as equals. Okay, senior brother Ouyang, as far as I know, the cause of your death is precisely this management training program. Specifically? Ouyang Shang asked with great interest. Specifically, how did we die? Wang Lu shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, the survivors have never mentioned it to me. Then how are you so sure that the culprit is the management training program? Deduced from the clues among many possibilities, this is the most likely. Wang Lu confidently took his reasoning as the truth. I see. Ouyang Shang did not refute. Then have you ever considered, even if I can accept your explanation, can Lingjian school? Probably not. That's why I specifically accompanied you for a day. Wang Lu was also very calm. It doesn't matter if others don't believe it, as long as you believe it. Hearing this, Ouyang Shang smiled. As expected of the future chief disciple of Lingjian school. Talent, strength, and scheming are all at such a level. Why should Lingjian school worry about not being able to revive? Seeing you, I feel that even if all of us die, it doesn't matter. I think it does matter a bit. Ouyang Shang laughed even louder. I just meant it. In this era, I am like a star in the sky, and one day I will become a blazing sun. How could I die so easily? That would be the loss of the entire 9 regions. Your shameless face actually has a bit of my charm. Wang Lu smiled. Speaking of which, although I don't know the details of what happened that year, but, Ouyang Shang waved his hand again. Forget it, I'm not interested in the experience of the loser. Since you were born in the history of my failure, there's no need to tell me what I'm like as a loser. It's uncomfortable to hear it. After a pause, Ouyang Shang said, in any case, since this management training program can get such a strong aide like you, I think even if there was such a fatal crisis before, when the time comes we can turn misfortune into fortune. At least for now we can work in that direction. Wang Lu nodded. This is also one of the purposes of me following you all the way. After all, he didn't know the whole picture of what happened more than 100 years ago. So Wang Lu couldn't determine which link went wrong that led to such a tragedy in Spirit Sword Mountain. And in the case where everything was still unknown, rash action was likely to have the opposite effect. For example, the worst-case scenario was that the cause of the destruction of the Golden Generation was an opponent that they simply couldn't match. In those days, the Lingjian school survived by cutting off one's wrist. If they listened to Wang Lu's suggestion at this time and everyone holed up in seclusion, the result would be that they didn't even have the chance to cut off one's wrist. In the real sense, they would be completely wiped out. The possibility of this guess was not great, but who dared to bet? Therefore, compared to rash action, Wang Lu would rather go steady and personally follow the Golden Generation to reclaim the Savage Land. By then, no matter what situation they encountered, there would always be room for mediation. He was not too worried that he would be buried along with them. After all, there were survivors in the Golden Generation. Since Feng Yin and Wang Wu could survive, of course he could too. Let's push this trainee plan to completion together. For Wang Lu, compared to simply using his time travel advantage to save people, wouldn't it be better if he could complete the management training of that year? With the promise of Wang Lu, Ouyang Shang seemed very happy. Wang Lu, on the other hand, was very calm. Then, next, Ouyang Shang said, next, according to what I said, we should first adjust the strategic policy of the location of Blessed Fountain. The strength of the Flood Dragon is beyond expectation, so we... Half a day later, Wang Lu saw the result of Ouyang Shang's adjustment. This big brother of Spirit Sword sect did have an unexpected specialty. Wang Lu thought that after seeing the power of the Flood Dragon, he would choose to return to Jadeite Forest, but the result was, ha ha ha, big brother, I can't believe we meet again after only 3 days. Could it be that you've encountered a problem that you need the help of us junior brothers and sisters? In midair, a hearty laughter came. In his field of vision, a group of cultivators wearing Spirit Sword Sect's robes flew over. The leader was a big man with a curly beard. He was strong and had a loud and clear voice, with messy short hair, a loose gray robe, and 2 wine gourds on his waist. His unruly temperament assaulted one's face. However, if one looked carefully at his facial features, one could find that he was actually not that old. Especially his quick-witted eyes, which showed a bit of immaturity. However, to be able to become the leader of the elite team, this curly-beard man obviously had his own uniqueness. Even Ouyang Shang looked at him differently. Junior brother Yang, this time, I'm not asking you for help, but to give you an opportunity. While the two of them were talking, the group led by the curly-beard man, Yang Fei, had already landed at the top of the mountain. What opportunity? Young Fei was impatient. After landing, he couldn't wait to ask, "Did you catch a beautiful seductress?" "There's a big guy." Ouyang Shang pointed his finger at the location of Blessed Fountain. "I plan to let everyone share it. In addition to you, I also called junior brother Zhou and junior brother Han Churen. Oh, that's 4 groups of people. What kind of big guy is worth so many people? 4 groups of people are scattered in different places, so the time spent on the round-trip trip is already a lot." Yang Fei's words actually showed the quality of his coarse words. Ouyang Shang lightly smiled. "You'll know when you see it." Seeing that his senior brother intended to keep it a secret, Yang Fei didn't care about it. In any case, he had been with his big brother for so many years, when did he ever let him down? It was just that. Then Yang Fei couldn't help but raise his eyebrows as a new question came to him. "Who is that guy? He looks unfamiliar." He pointed his finger at Wang Lu, who was chatting with the young cultivators of Spirit Sword sect that he brought with him. The corner of Ouyang Shang's mouth curled up. "He's the byproduct of that old thing sect leader enjoying life." "Oh." Yang Fei was somewhat in disbelief, but soon convinced himself. "No wonder he looks a bit like you." You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.